Chapter 75. The Azure world had 3 continents: the Azure continent, the Divine Central continent, and the Azure Below continent. In the Azure continent, besides the largest empire, the Great Cloud Empire, there were nearly 100 other countries. Besides these countries, there were also various thousand-year-old clans and mysterious mountain powers. Kuraki Academy didn't belong to the mountain powers, but even those mysterious mountain powers didn't dare underestimate this academy, because Kuraki Academy was spread throughout the entire Azure continent. Even the Great Cloud Empire had a Kuraki Academy, but that wasn't the most terrifying part. Rumor had it that Kuraki Academy's headquarters stood in the most glorious land of the Martial Way, the Divine Central Continent. In the Azure continent, the various Kuraki Academies were like nobles, and they only listened to the orders of the Kuraki Academy in the Divine Central Continent. However, this didn't mean that there was no contact between them. All the Kuraki Academies in the Azure continent competed against each other, but they also cooperated. A summon. This was one of their methods of cooperation. When one party was in trouble, they could summon help from all over. Of course, it wasn't free help and there was a price to pay. The price that Kuraki Academy had paid wasn't just a small price, it was extremely huge. High-grade Earth rank cultivation techniques, high-grade Earth rank martial techniques, high-grade Earth rank movement techniques, and 500,000 top-grade spirit stones. Not to mention a chi-controlling realm and a few ascension realms, even killing a divine unity realm expert would be a price that countless people would pay. There would always be brave men under heavy rewards. In next to no time, countless spirit pigeons soared into the sky from Kuraki Academy and flew in all directions. It was a rather magnificent scene. The Imperial Capital. Kuraki Academy didn't have the ability to suppress what Yi Xian had done in Kuraki Academy, so it didn't take long for the entire Imperial Capital to know what Yi Xian had done in Kuraki Academy. Shock. The entire Imperial Capital was shocked. How many years had it been since Azure Below Academy had faded out of sight? No, it had faded out of sight. But now, Azure Below Academy actually dared to fight Kuraki Academy head-on. And they just won. The most terrifying thing was that Yi Xian had actually killed one of the most monstrous geniuses of Kuraki Academy, Fenju, and even used the corpses of Kuraki Academy students to write the words Kuraki Academy in front of Kuraki Academy. This was a fierce slap to Kuraki Academy's face. Yi Xian. This time Yi Xian's name once again spread throughout the Imperial Capital. Unlike last time, this time, countless people were curious about him and some even admired him. A swordsman was always easily worshipped. In short, this time, Songlan Academy could be said to have a whole new level of respect for the entire Imperial Capital. Old Ji brought Yi Xian's group of 4 back to Azure Below Academy. In front of Azure Below Hall, Yi Xian saw Yi Ling. Yi Ling threw herself into Yi Xian's arms. She hugged Yi Xian tightly, fearing that Yi Xian would disappear. She didn't cry. She simply hugged Yi Xian, and there was an unusual determination in her eyes. Looking at Yi Ling in his arms, Yi Xian's cold expression softened. He gently rubbed Yi Ling's little head. "Brother promised you that I would come back." As he spoke, he looked at the black-dressed woman in a wheelchair not far away. "How should I address you?" The black-dressed woman pondered for a moment, then said, "Lu Jioga." Yi Xian nodded. "Miss Lu, thank you." The black-dressed woman shook her head. "You are a state knight and the state of Jiang is on your side. Kuraki Academy will not let this matter rest, take care." After speaking, the old man behind her pushed her away. The state of Jiang. Yi Xian glanced at the black-dressed woman's back. "I'll remember it." The black-dressed woman nodded slightly and soon, the two disappeared not far away. At this time Yi Ling suddenly said, "Brother, I'll go cook for you. We want to eat too." At this time Mo Yunqi, who was behind Yi Xian, suddenly chuckled, "Xiaoling, make some for us too." Bai Zhe nodded, "Me too." Yi Ling chuckled, "There will be some." After speaking, she turned and ran away quickly. At this time Old Man Ji suddenly pointed with his finger and soon 4 golden pills fell in front of Yi Xian and the others. "Go and heal your injuries first." Yi Xian nodded, then picked up his pill and walked to his room. Mo Yunqi looked at the pill in front of him, then exclaimed, "Old Man Ji, this pill is extraordinary." As he spoke, he looked at Old Man Ji. "Actually, you are quite rich. Speaking of which, since you are so rich, can you improve the quality of our lives? Or you can recruit a few female students too." Old Man Ji said indifferently, "Scram." Mo Yunqi chuckled, "You can think about it, especially the last one." After speaking, he turned and ran away. Bai Zhe and Ji Anji turned and left as well. At this moment, Jiang Yuetian appeared not too far away from Old Man Ji. Jiang Yuetian glanced into the distance and then said, "The 3 fellows you recruited are all not bad, especially that Yi Xian. This kid is not simple." Old Man Ji said indifferently, "Normally your imperial family would wish for my Tsanglan Academy and Karaki Academy to fight to the death, but you came out today to be the peacemaker. That's not normal." Jiang Yuetian laughed. "Indeed, I wish for you to fight to the death with Li Xuansong. But what about after that? Your Tsanglan Academy will be completely destroyed and Karaki Academy will be heavily injured, but will it end just like that?" "No, Azure Prefecture's Karaki Academy will continue to send people over here to rebuild Karaki Academy. At that time they will truly be the strongest." Old Man Ji said indifferently, "I understand. You want my Tsanglan Academy to continue wasting time with Karaki Academy?" Jiang Yuetian shook his head. "Old Man Ji, this old man will be frank with you. This time, my imperial family stands on your side. Of course we can't openly help you, but we are willing to help you secretly. After all, that kid is a state scholar and he has a good relationship with Little Jiu. My imperial family values him greatly." Old Man Ji drank a mouthful of wine and fell silent. Jiang Yuetian laughed. "Old Man Ji, you won't object, right?" Old Man Ji shook his head. "I won't object, but don't play any tricks on him." Jiang Yuetian laughed. "Of course not. We will protect him in secret as well. This kid isn't just loyal, he also cares about his country. This time he helped Little Jiu Tian greatly. My imperial family has no ill intentions towards him, this old man can guarantee." Old Man Ji nodded. "That's good." With that, he drank a mouthful of wine and turned to leave. Jiang Yuetian turned to glance at Tsanglan Academy and said with a smile, "Great swordsman. What a great swordsman." With that, he turned and disappeared on the spot. Inside the kitchen, Yiling was cooking by the fire. At this moment, a little girl suddenly appeared not far from her. The little girl wore a small cotton jacket, with a long braid behind her head and looked quite cute. Yiling glanced at the little girl but didn't say anything. The little girl said calmly, "Your brother almost died today." Yiling hugged her knees and didn't say anything. The little girl looked straight at Yiling. "You've already implicated him many times. Today he almost died because of you, and in the future his enemies might still target you." Yiling's tears suddenly flowed down, and she couldn't stop wiping them away. The little girl walked in front of Yiling. "You have to be independent and you have to become stronger. Only then will you not implicate your brother. No, I should say, in the future you will be able to protect your brother better." Yiling raised her head to look at the little girl. "Big brother is very powerful. Can I protect him?" The corners of the little girl's mouth curled up. "He is very powerful, but compared to you he is far inferior. As long as you come with me, I can guarantee that in the future, you will be even more dazzling than the country of Zhang's and Guosher." Yiling was stunned and then said, "Why?" The little girl's smile gradually widened, or rather she was a little excited, "Because you have the cold spirit physique, a legendary special physique. As long as you come with me, my cold north sect will use all its resources to nurture you, and let you kill your way through the Azure World's monster list." Yiling was silent for a long time and finally she raised her head to look at the little girl. "I promise you." The little girl was wild with joy, but at this moment Yiling said, "But I have to accompany Big Brother for a while?" The little girl hesitated and then nodded. "Okay, I will come find you when the time comes." After saying that, she turned around and disappeared. In front of the stove, Yiling hugged her knees and just stared blankly at the flames in the stove. Night. In the Azure Wave Palace, everyone gathered. It was time to eat. There were more than 10 dishes on the table, and all of them were personally prepared by Yiling and Yi Xian. During this time, Yiling would occasionally put food into Yi Xian's bowl, and all of them were meat. This caused Mo Yunqi and the others to be speechless. This was his biological sister. After the meal, Old Man Ji took a sip of wine and then said, "Let me tell you some bad news. Karaki Academy has already issued a summon order. In the entire Azure province, there are a total of 72 Karaki Academies, and country of Zhang's Karaki Academy is only one of them. Now they have issued a summon order, and they are offering extremely high rewards, which means that the super geniuses and monsters of the remaining 71 Karaki Academies may come to country of Zhang." After saying that, he glanced at Yi Xian and the others. "What you will face next is not 1 or 2 geniuses and monsters, but a group of them, and I can't do anything." Yi Xian raised the bowl of soup in front of him and drank it in one gulp. "Just do it." Beside Yi Xian, Mo Yunqi nodded. "We can only do it." After saying that, he seemed to have thought of something and then looked at Old Man Ji. "Old man, Karaki Academy has so many branches, what about our Tsanglan Academy?" Speaking of which, does Art Songlan Academy not have any background? Yi Xian also looked at Old Man Ji. This was also the reason why he was curious. Old Man Ji was silent, and after a moment he took a sip of wine and then said softly, Art Songlan Academy headquarters is located in the Central Plains, and together with Karaki Academy, we are known as the two branches, and Art Songlan Academy has a total of 108 branches in Songlan continent. At this moment, Mo Yunqi suddenly stood up. Old man, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and call for help. Bai Zhe hurriedly nodded in agreement. Call for help. Old Man Ji shook his head. I can't. Mo Yunqi was stunned and then said, Why? Old Man Ji said softly, This side has declined. We are the weakest among all the branches of Songlan Academy. To put it bluntly, they look down on us and they don't even want to be associated with us and they don't acknowledge us, understand? Chapter 76. The expressions of Yi Xian and the others stiffened. Old Man Ji, on the other hand, kept drinking without saying a word. Mo Yunqi hesitated for a moment and said, Old man, you guys did not do well in the past. Old Man Ji glanced at Mo Yunqi. Mo Yunqi's expression changed slightly and he quickly said, Old man, we can talk this out. Don't fight. Old Man Ji shook his head slightly. In this Qingzhou, our Kanglan Academy was once glorious. However, this is all in the past. There is no point in talking about it now. The three of you follow me to the back mountain. After saying that, he stood up and left. Yi Xian and the others stood up and followed him. Only Yi Ling was left in the hall. Yi Ling clenched her small hands tightly. Brother. I will work hard too. Her eyes were filled with determination. Back mountain. Old Man Ji brought the three of them to a waterfall. His gaze landed on Bai Zhe. Now we need to increase the intensity of your training. We need to stimulate the power of the demon beast bloodline in your body as soon as possible. After saying that, he pointed to a pile of 2 metal balls the size of a human head not far away. Old Man Ji said calmly, wear it and go under the waterfall. Bai Zhe hesitated for a moment, then nodded. He hung the 2 metal balls on his body, and the ground beneath his feet clearly caved in a little. Under everyone's gaze, Bai Zhe came to the bottom of the waterfall and tied his feet to the iron chain. Soon Bai Zhe's beast-like howls came from under the waterfall. Mo Yunqi could not bear to look at it. This was too cruel. At this moment Old Man Ji looked at him. Seeing this, Mo Yunqi's expression changed slightly and he quickly said, Old man, I think I am already very strong. Old Man Ji said calmly, Are you sure? Mo Yunqi nodded quickly. Yes. Old Man Ji looked at Yi Xian. Use that sword on him to determine life and death. Mo Yunqi was speechless. Yi Xian looked at Mo Yunqi. Mo Yunqi jumped up. Old man, are you joking? Don't get drunk. Old Man Ji said indifferently, rather than letting you die at the hands of those Karaki students, it's better to let you die at the hands of your own people. This way it'll be more dignified. Mo Yunqi was silent. Yi Xian walked to his side and gently patted his shoulder. Isn't it just a little hardship? It's no big deal. If you really don't want to suffer, that's fine too. I guarantee that this sword won't kill you. At most, it will cripple you. The corner of Mo Yunqi's mouth twitched. He hesitated for a moment and looked at Old Man Ji. Tell me, how are you going to torture me? Old Man Ji casually tossed a long iron chain in front of Mo Yunqi. There were small iron balls tied to the chain. Old Man Ji said calmly, wear it and run 100 laps around our back mountain. Once in the morning, once in the afternoon and once in the evening. The time limit is an hour. If you exceed the time limit, you'll have to add another 20 laps. Yi Xian's expression was a little strange. The back mountain was not small. The entire journey was at least 40 to 50 kilometers and the time limit was an hour, and he had to carry this iron ball. In any case, he couldn't do it. Mo Yunqi's face fell. Old man, do you want me to run until my legs break? Old Man Ji said calmly, running until your legs break is better than being broken by others. Let's start now. If you say another word of nonsense, I'll add another 10 laps. Mo Yunqi. A moment later, Mo Yunqi began. As he ran, he shouted strangely. No one knew what he was shouting about. At this time, Old Man Ji looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian grinned. How to cultivate? I'll listen to Old Man Ji's instructions. Old Man Ji looked at Yi Xian with a complicated gaze. The power you used at Karaki Academy before, was it the power of the earth? Yi Xian nodded. Old Man Ji sighed softly. You're a little mysterious, but that's not important. Follow me. After saying that, he brought Yi Xian and Ji Anji to a small mountain. This small mountain in front of them was the one Yi Xian didn't finish blasting before. Yi Xian said softly, Old Man Ji, do you want me to continue blasting this small mountain? Old Man Ji said, yes and no. Yi Xian looked at Old Man Ji. Old Man Ji said softly, you're a swordsman and a martial artist. I don't understand the path of the sword Dao Yi, but I know a thing or two about the path of the martial Dao Yi. After saying that, he pointed at the small mountain in the distance. What do you think it is? Yi Xian said in a deep voice. A mountain. Old Man Ji shook his head. It's not a mountain. It's an obstacle. After saying that, he suddenly punched out. Boom. With a single punch, the small mountain collapsed with a loud rumble. Just like that, a small mountain collapsed. Yi Xian was dumbfounded. He knew that Old Man Ji was powerful, but he was still very shocked when he saw Old Man Ji's punch again. The power of a single punch was so strong. Old Man Ji turned to look at Yi Xian. Do you know what you lack the most? Yi Xian shook his head. Old Man Ji said softly, when you're angry you have enough killing intent but not enough aura. You have killing intent but not aura. Although your combat strength isn't weak, it's not enough. If you can mix your killing intent with aura, you'll be much stronger. Not only that, you'll be one step closer to becoming a martial Dao Grandmaster. As he said that, he looked at the collapsed small mountain in the distance. What is aura? Aura is a psychological suppression. When you faced the small mountain earlier, you treated it as a mountain that's difficult to destroy. In terms of mental state, you've already lost. You should treat it as a piece of trash that's blocking your path, a piece of trash that you can destroy at any time. Yi Xian said in a low voice, but it's not trash. Isn't that a little self-deceiving? Good question. Old Man Ji looked at Yi Xian. I'm very pleased that you can think that way. And I want you to understand that aura is a form of confidence. When facing an enemy, you must have the confidence that you're invincible. Those who are your enemies, those who stand in front of you, and those who block your path are all trash. Of course, confidence isn't arrogance. To put it simply, we have to look down on our enemies strategically and take them seriously tactically. As he said that, he pointed to the collapsed small mountain in front of him. In my heart, this is a pile of trash. However, when I attack, I won't look down on it at all. Not only will I not look down on it, but I will also use my full strength. I look down on you in my heart, but I take you seriously when I attack. Yi Xian turned to look at the small mountain in the distance and fell into deep thought. Old Man Ji said again, do you know why Lanxiao is strong? Yi Xian turned to look at Old Man Ji. Old Man Ji said softly, she's strong because of her aura. Even when facing enemies who are much stronger than her, she doesn't feel the slightest fear in her heart. Even when facing me, she doesn't feel the slightest bit of weakness in terms of aura. She can't beat me, but she has never been afraid of me. This kind of aura is rare among the younger generation of the state of Jiang. As he said that, he suddenly looked at Yi Xian. You don't have aura, but you have something that others don't. What is it? Yi Xian asked subconsciously. Old Man Ji said softly, fearlessness. Fearlessness? Yi Xian was puzzled. Old Man Ji said, you don't have that kind of domineering aura, but you've never been afraid of anyone either. In Karaki Academy, even though you knew that you had no chance of winning, you didn't feel the slightest bit of fear. You dared to fight when you said you wanted to. Not only that, when you faced that girl you didn't feel the slightest bit of weakness in your state of mind when you talked to her. Perhaps this is also the reason why she thinks so highly of you. As he said that, he glanced at Yi Xian. From you, I think of a saying, you can be weak, but you can't be a coward. Yi Xian. At this moment, Old Man Ji suddenly said, follow me. As he said that, he led Yi Xian into the distance. Soon he brought Yi Xian to another mountain. This mountain was several times bigger than the previous one. The previous mountain could barely be called a mountain, but this one was a real mountain and it wasn't small at all. Old Man Ji looked at Yi Xian. What's your first feeling when you see this mountain? Yi Xian thought for a moment before saying, if you want me to shatter this mountain with one punch, then I think you must be crazy. Old Man Ji drank a mouthful of wine. This is what you lack. You don't fear the enemy when they are powerful. In this aspect you do better than many people. However, you lack that domineering aura of wanting to kill you no matter how powerful you are. No, it should be said that you have that aura, but only when your sister is in danger will you have it. As he said that, he drank another mouthful of wine. I'll just stand here and think. When I understand, I'll leave. After he finished speaking, he leisurely walked to a rock at the side, tilted his body and directly lay down on the rock. Not long after, sounds of snoring could be heard. Yi Xian looked at the small mountain in front of him and fell silent. In actuality he had sensed it before. It was from Lanxiao. The feeling Lancio gave him was that there was no problem in this world that could stump her, and there was no one that she could not defeat. Of course, the most obvious was the mysterious woman. Back on the cloud ship, the mysterious woman's aura with the water sword in her hand had truly shocked him. If I want you to live, you will live. If I want you to die, you will die. One sword to decide life and death. Thinking of this, Yi Xian was suddenly stunned. In the next moment he suddenly took out his spirit elegant sword. Yi Xian held the sword in his hand and looked at the small mountain in the distance. In his mind, the scene of the mysterious woman on the cloud ship kept appearing. That woman held the water sword as if there was no one in this world that she could not kill. Wasn't this a type of aura? She used one sword to decide life and death, and he used one sword to decide life and death. But why was there such a huge difference? Putting aside his realm and strength, his state of mind was already biased. One sword to decide life and death. What this sword technique required the most wasn't cultivation but aura. The aura of, if I want you to live, then you will live, and if I want you to die, then you will definitely die. When he thought up to here, Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. So I misunderstood this sword technique. As he spoke, he raised his head and looked at the nearby mountain. Boom. A sword howl suddenly resounded. In the next moment, bang. A powerful aura surged out from Yi Xian's body, and the ground before him cracked inch by inch. Not far away, old Ji suddenly sat up. He stared blankly at Yi Xian in the distance. What the hell? I taught you to comprehend fist aura, but you comprehend sword aura? What the hell are you talking about? Chapter 77. Sword Force. In the distance, Yi Xian held the spirit grace sword in his hand, and he emanated a peerlessly domineering aura. This aura was based on the sword, so it could be considered as a sword force. With the spirit elegant sword in hand, Yi Xian slowly walked towards the huge mountain. With every step he took, the ground in front of him would crack several feet apart. Not long after, with him as the center, the ground within a radius of several hundred feet around him had already cracked into a spider web shape. Not far away, old Ji stared fixedly at Yi Xian. At this moment, he didn't seem drunk at all, and there was only seriousness on his face. Sword force. It wasn't just the sword force that Yi Xian had revealed, it was also the sword technique that he was about to execute. Even though Yi Xian hadn't executed the sword technique, he'd already sensed the sword technique's force. This was absolutely not something that an earth-rank sword technique could accomplish. At this moment he didn't care about the force. Instead he cared about why Yi Xian possessed such a terrifying sword technique. Right at this moment Yi Xian suddenly stopped, and the sword force around him instantly vanished without a trace. Yi Xian lowered his head to look at the spirit grace sword that was trembling slightly in his hand. I won't disgrace you. Boom. A sword howl resounded abruptly. Yi Xian grinned and released his hand. In the next moment, the spirit grace sword transformed into a sword light that flashed. Sword light flickered around Yi Xian, controlling the sword with qi. Presently, he was even more proficient in controlling the sword because his compatibility with the spirit grace sword had reached 80%. Right at this moment, old Ji suddenly said, "Why didn't you execute that strike?" Yi Xian turned to look at old Ji. He tapped with his finger, and the spirit grace sword suddenly landed firmly on his right. He smiled and said, "There's no need for that strike. Because I've understood what force is." Force. It could be said that his current strike to decide life and death had already surpassed the superior grade earth rank without the energy of the earth being mixed in. If it was combined with the energy of the earth, then this strike would absolutely not be inferior to a heaven rank martial technique. It should be said that in his heart at this moment, deciding life and death with a single strike was no longer just a sword technique. It was also a kind of sword Tao concept and state of mind. Old Ji looked at Yi Xian for a long time. Suddenly he smiled. Karaki Academy's expulsion of the youth in front of him was the greatest loss they had suffered in the past several hundred years. Without a doubt, that was the most profitable one he had ever made in so many years. Old man Ji patted Yi Xian's shoulder lightly. It's good to be young. With that he turned around and left. Yi Xian did not leave. After he sheathed his sword, he raised his head and looked at the mountain not far away. He slowly clenched his right fist. Boom. An invisible pressure suddenly rippled out from his fist. Step by step, Yi Xian walked towards the mountain in front of him. When he was about 10 feet away from the mountain wall suddenly cracked. At this moment, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. His right hand clenched tightly. Crack, 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 crack. The entire mountain wall continued to crack, and the cracks spread rapidly in all directions. He was pressuring others with force. The fist Tao? The sword Tao? Most of the time they were actually connected. Right at this moment Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes, and then he suddenly charged forward and smashed his fist against the mountain wall. Boom! Yi Xian's entire arm pierced through the mountain wall. In the next moment the mountain wall collapsed and countless rocks shot into the air before being crushed into powder. Yi Xian moved over 10 m back. There was a pitch-black hole in the mountain wall before him, and it was so deep that he could not see the bottom of it. Actually, this punch of his wasn't an area of effect attack, it was a single target attack. This punch was something he'd thought of on the spur of the moment. He just wanted to try it out in the beginning, but he hadn't expected it to actually be so powerful. Even though it wasn't as powerful as his sword Dao, it was at least a few times stronger than the punch annihilation from before. It could be said that this punch of his could even instantly annihilate a levitation realm profounder. If it was combined with the energy of the earth, then it could even pose a threat to a nether passage realm profounder. Yi Xian glanced at his fist and chuckled. I'll call this move, one punch to the head, and it's a fist technique that was made for smashing heads. I created it myself, haha. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. As he left, another layer of the mountain wall behind him suddenly collapsed. Yi Xian arrived before the waterfall, and Bai Zhe was still howling incessantly beneath it. Yi Xian sized Bai Zhe up carefully and was slightly surprised, because he noticed that the veins on Bai Zhe's body had bulged up, and the blood vessels beneath his skin were actually trembling slightly. The energy of his bloodline? Yi Xian was slightly curious. He'd heard of some people who possessed a half-human half-demon physique. These people possessed the bloodline of demon beasts, and if they were able to activate the demon bloodline within their bodies, then they would be able to obtain demon energy and improve their strength greatly. On the other hand, Bai Zhe obviously hadn't truly activated the energy of his bloodline. Once Bai Zhe activated the energy of his bloodline, then his body and strength would definitely undergo a qualitative transformation. After all, Bai Zhe's current strength was extremely formidable. Once the demon beast bloodline within his body was activated, then he would definitely become even stronger. Right at this moment Yi Xian suddenly turned around and saw a figure dashing madly not too far away. It was Mo Yunqi. Mo Yunqi's clothes were completely drenched, and he was exhausted like an ox. Meanwhile, Mo Yunqi suddenly gazed at Yi Xian who stood nearby, and he was stunned when he saw Yi Xian. After that he said, You didn't cultivate? Yi Xian nodded. I didn't. Mo Yunqi blinked, and then he said furiously in the next moment, Fuck. Why didn't you cultivate? Why didn't Geezer G torture you? That's too unfair. Yi Xian walked over to Mo Yunqi, and he patted Mo Yunqi on the shoulder lightly. Do you know what a genius is? As he spoke he pointed at himself. See that? This is a genius. I'm going to sleep. You run slowly, I'll support you spiritually. After that he left into the distance. On the spot, Mo Yunqi suddenly spat to the side. Genius? Shameless thing. Just you wait, I'll beat you until you cry. After that he turned and ran into the distance, wailing and howling as he ran. No one knew what he was howling about. When Yi Xian returned to the Kanglin Palace, Yi Ling wasn't asleep. Instead she sat on the stone steps and hugged her knees. When she saw Yi Xian she jumped up. Yi Xian walked over to Yi Ling, and he gently rubbed Yi Ling's little head. He said gently, Why aren't you asleep yet? Yi Ling hugged Yi Xian's arm and pulled him to sit on the stone steps. Then she gently leaned her head on Yi Xian's shoulder and said softly, I want to accompany Big Brother. Yi Xian smiled and said, Big Brother is always here. Yi Ling tilted her head and looked at Yi Xian. Big Brother, if I can cultivate, will you object? Yi Xian was stunned for a moment, then he smiled and said, Why would I object? If you can cultivate, you'll be able to protect Big Brother in the future. Yi Xian blinked then grinned. She hugged Yi Xian's arm tightly, then looked up at the sky. The night sky was dotted with stars. Yi Ling said softly, Big Brother, do you think Mother is still here? Yi Xian was silent. Mother? Towards that woman. He was getting more and more blurry. At this moment Yi Ling said softly, It doesn't matter if she's here or not. Anyway, I only have Big Brother. Big Brother is enough. Yi Xian gently rubbed his head against Yi Ling's little head. As long as you're safe and happy, Big Brother is willing to do anything. Under the starry sky, the two siblings leaned against each other quietly. The next day, at daybreak, Yi Xian went to the back of the mountain and continued to cultivate. Not only did he cultivate, but he also cultivated Imperial Sword. He could already control the sword, but he was not proficient enough. What he needed to do now was to cultivate this Imperial Sword technique to the extreme. Bai Zhe and Mo Yunqi were also cultivating crazily. For the two of them the pressure was very great. They came to Zhonglan Academy just like Yi Xian for some special reasons. No matter what the reason was, they had now integrated into this academy and had a sense of belonging. And the two of them were very clear about the current situation of this academy. If they were not strong, they could be killed by Karaki Academy at any time. Cultivate with their lives on the line. And a few days later, outside the imperial city, 3 young men in ink-white robes suddenly galloped over. The 3 of them were extremely fast, and the pedestrians on the road all gave way. In front of the city gate, seeing that the 3 of them had no intention of slowing down, a soldier hurriedly shouted, "Who are you?" The 3 of them did not slow down. Seeing this scene, the soldier's expression changed drastically, and he hurriedly retreated. Just like that, the 3 of them directly rushed into the city. Soon, a group of soldiers blocked in front of the 3 of them. A middle-aged man glared at the 3 of them. "Fast horses are not allowed in the city, the 3 of you?" At this moment, the young man in the lead suddenly jumped down from his horse. In the next moment, the young man suddenly disappeared. In an instant, a muffled sound rang out, and the middle-aged man was directly sent flying. Seeing this scene, the soldiers were furious and were about to attack, but at this moment, an angry shout suddenly came from the side. "Impudent!" As the voice fell, an old man appeared in front of the group of soldiers. The old man glanced at the group of soldiers coldly. "Can't you see? They are all students of my Karaki Academy." Karaki Academy. The soldiers' expressions changed slightly, and they did not dare to attack. The old man turned to look at the 3 behind him. "Where are the 3 of you from?" The young man in the lead said indifferently, "Tang Empire." Tang Empire. Hearing this, the soldiers' expressions suddenly became a little ugly. The Tang Empire was the enemy of the Jiang Empire. The old man nodded. "Please return to the academy with me." The young man in the lead shook his head. "There's no need." "Where's Yi Xian?" The old man hesitated for a moment and said, "It's better to give it further thought." "The 3 of you, give it further thought?" The young man in the lead said coldly, "If we give it further thought, then we probably won't even be able to get any scraps. Don't waste time and just tell me where Yi Xian is. Once we take his head, the 3 of us will be able to return to the empire." The old man glanced at the 3 of them. "That fellow Yi Xian isn't an ordinary person. He's at Zhonglan Academy." Right at this moment, the middle-aged man who was blasted flying earlier suddenly stood up, and he gazed at the young man in the lead. "Yi Xian is at Zhonglan Academy. If you don't know the way, then we'll take you there." The young man in the lead said indifferently, "Lead the way." The middle-aged man turned around to glance at the others, and then he roared furiously, "Give the order for all brothers to have an hour of rest. Go cheer for me at Zhonglan Academy, and I'll break the legs of anyone who doesn't come." Chapter 78. Cheer. The middle-aged man led the 3 Tang Kingdom's Karaki students towards Zhonglan Academy, and behind them was a group of soldiers from the state of Jiang. Besides the soldiers from the state of Jiang, there was also a large group of spectators. Moreover, more and more people were joining in. All of these people had come to cheer for Zhonglan Academy. Originally, these people didn't care about the battle between Karaki Academy and Zhonglan Academy. Or perhaps, they wished for nothing more than for the 2 academies to fight to the death. But it was different now. Because the people who had come were actually from the state of Tang. The state of Tang. The mortal enemies of the state of Jiang. How many people from the state of Jiang had died at the hands of the state of Tang during the war? Now, the Karaki students from the state of Tang had actually come to the state of Jiang. At this moment, practically everyone was on the side of Zhonglan Academy. This was no longer a battle between academies, but a battle between 2 countries. The expression of the old man from Karaki Academy instantly turned slightly unsightly when he witnessed this scene. At this moment, he suddenly felt that allowing the students from the state of Tang to come to the state of Jiang was a huge mistake. Karaki Academy was used to being superior, and they didn't care about what others thought. Thus, they'd neglected the relationship between the state of Jiang and the state of Tang. Or perhaps it could be said that they didn't care about the thoughts of the people at the bottom of the hierarchy. However, they'd never imagined that their actions would incur the wrath of the masses. The old man hesitated for a moment before he hurried back to Karaki Academy. He felt that this matter had to be dealt with seriously. Otherwise, Karaki Academy would lose the support of the people in the state of Jiang. Meanwhile, the group of soldiers led the 3 Karaki students towards Zhonglan Academy. The 3 Karaki students had indifferent expressions, or perhaps their eyes were filled with disdain and arrogance. In next to no time, the group arrived at the foot of Tsanglan Academy's mountain. At the foot of the mountain, they saw a little girl carrying a basket that contained some wild vegetables. This little girl was Yi Ling, who'd come down the mountain to gather wild vegetables. Yi Ling was slightly stunned when she saw the group of people. She didn't run because Old Man Ji had said that it was safe at the foot of the mountain. Meanwhile, the middle-aged man who led the group of soldiers suddenly walked over to Yi Ling. "Little girl, is Yi Xian here?" Yi Ling blinked. "Why are you looking for him?" The middle-aged man pointed at the 3 karate students not far away. "These 3 are from the Tang Empire. They want to challenge Yi Xian. We're here to cheer for them." Yi Ling looked at the 3 students from Kuraki Academy, then turned around and shouted towards the mountain. "Brother, the people from Kuraki Academy are here again. Everyone." At this moment, a green-robed man flashed over from the mountain. The person who came was Yi Xian. Yi Xian's speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he had already arrived at the foot of the mountain, but he did not stop. Seeing Yi Xian, the leader of the 3 karate students sneered and took a step forward. "So you're Yi Xian?" "I'm a student of the Tang Empire's Karaki College, Li." Right at this moment, Yi Xian's speed suddenly rose explosively, and he traversed around 30 m in just the blink of an eye to arrive in front of the man who spoke. At the same time, a strand of light flashed. The man hadn't even finished speaking when his figure stiffened on the spot. A light breeze blew by. The man's head suddenly fell off his neck. Blood sprayed out like a fountain. Everyone here was dumbstruck. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly dodged to the left, and he slashed horizontally with his sword. The head of a karate student instantly flew into the air. Meanwhile, the last karate student had finally recovered from his shock, and he turned around and fled. Yi Xian didn't pursue him, and he turned around and walked towards Yi Ling instead. However, the sword in his hand suddenly flew up and slashed behind him. The head of the fleeing student from Kuraki Academy was pierced through by a sword. The sword carried a strand of blood behind it as it spun in the air, and then it flew back to Yi Xian. Yi Xian caught the sword with his right hand while he pulled Yi Ling with his left. "Come, let's go cook." As soon as he finished speaking, the brother and sister pair walked slowly up the mountain while everyone watched. Everyone at the foot of the mountain was dumbstruck. He died just like that? Instant kill? Before everyone could recover from their shock, Yi Xian had already vanished into the distance with his sister, Yi Ling. Swordsman. How amazing! Karaki Academy actually didn't want this fellow? Those fellows from Karaki Academy are really blind. Blind? I think they're stupid. Amongst the younger generation of Jiang Kingdom, I'm afraid only Guoshuren can defeat Yi Xian. I heard that he's friends with Guoshuren. Alas, I told you that Guoshuren thinks highly of Yi Xian, so how could he be an ordinary person? See, I'm telling the truth, right? See what? I remember that you were the one who said Guoshuren misjudged him and that Yi Xian was trash. Soon, the news of Yi Xian instantly killing 3 Karaki Academy students spread throughout the imperial capital like a plague. At this moment, the people of the imperial capital were in an uproar. Yi Xian killed Karaki Academy students, but they were also from Tang Kingdom. Yi Xian instantly killing 3 people from Tang Kingdom was undoubtedly a great honor to the people of Jiang Kingdom. More and more people were dissatisfied with Karaki Academy. Originally, the conflict between the 2 academies was an internal matter of Jiang Kingdom, but Karaki Academy actually invited external help, and it was from Tang Kingdom. Although many people were unhappy with Karaki Academy, no one dared to publicly criticize them. No one dared to casually offend this colossus. It was worth mentioning that the foot of Tsanglan Academy's mountain was somewhat lively. Every day, some people would come to the foot of the mountain, including some women, as if they were waiting for something. Karaki Academy. In a large hall, Li Xuanzang sat at the head of the table. On both sides of him were the instructors and elders of Karaki Academy. They were all people with real power in Karaki Academy. Li Xuanzang said indifferently, "All 3 of them are levitation realm, but none of them could withstand a single strike from Yi Xian. What do you think?" The hall was silent. Everyone's expressions were slightly solemn. Even though those 3 from Tang Kingdom were inferior to Fenju, they weren't weak. However, they weren't even able to withstand a single strike of Yi Xian's. They were instantly killed. Yi Xian was only at the Qi resistance realm. This wasn't a challenge of surmounting realms, it was an instant kill. After a moment of silence, an old man stood out. This person's strength is probably only inferior to Nguesher. I suggest that we notify those students from other places and ask them not to rashly challenge this person and sacrifice their lives for nothing. Why should we notify them? Right at this moment, Li Xuanzang spoke indifferently, "Let them continue challenging him." Everyone looked at Li Xuanzang with puzzled expressions. Li Xuanzang spoke indifferently, "The more people he kills, the more enemies he'll make. Let him offend all of the 72 Karaki academies in Azure Prefecture." Killing with a borrowed knife. No one here was stupid, so they naturally understood what Li Xuanzang meant. Li Xuanzang slowly closed his eyes. Since Fenju's death, only Bei Qin remained in the younger generation of Karaki Academy. Just Bei Qin alone wouldn't be able to hold the fort. If they didn't have any outstanding geniuses to send to the Central Divine Prefecture, then the resources they obtained would definitely be reduced. That was undoubtedly lethal to Karaki Academy. After all, they received assistance from the main academy every single year, and the assistance included cultivation techniques, martial techniques, spirit artifacts. But the precondition was that they had to send monstrous geniuses over. Geniuses? What did this era lack the most? Besides resources, it lacked geniuses. Karaki Academy naturally had enemies in the Central Divine Prefecture, and it needed geniuses in order to prevent a power from falling into decline. However, they'd suffered heavy losses this time, and it could be said that they were at an absolute disadvantage when compared to the other academies. It was too late to foster new geniuses now, so the only way was to make the geniuses of the other academies suffer losses as well. Not only would it make Karaki Academy become enemies, but it would also exhaust the geniuses of those academies. Of course, if someone really killed Yi Xian, then it would naturally be for the best as well. In short, they just had to watch the battle from afar. Yi Xian. Li Xuanzang's face instantly turned gloomy when he thought of Yi Xian. Karaki Academy's losses this time were extraordinarily heavy. Actually, that wasn't all. The thing that upset him the most was that Yi Xian had intended to join Karaki Academy in the first place. If Karaki Academy had accepted Yi Xian, then Karaki Academy would have no chance of joining Karaki Academy at all. Yet now, Karaki Academy had Yi Xian, so it was an unknown factor. An unknown factor. Meanwhile, Li Xuanzang said, "Send my order. Anyone who's able to kill Yi Xian will be given 2 high-grade Earth-rank martial techniques, 2 Earth-rank cultivation techniques, and 1 million top-grade energy stones. Moreover, that person will even be able to enter the secret realm of Karaki Academy to cultivate." The expressions of everyone here changed when they heard this. 2 high-grade Earth-rank martial techniques, 2 Earth-rank cultivation techniques, and 1 million top-grade energy stones. That was a huge loss. It was even sufficient to place a bounty on the head of a divine convergence realm expert. But Yi Xian was only at the chi-controlling realm. An old man hesitated for a moment before he said, "Dean, isn't this price a little too great?" "Great?" Li Xuanzang glanced coldly at the old man. "If he doesn't die, then he'll definitely become a great enemy of our Karaki Academy. Our academy will definitely do its best to deal with him now. We can't underestimate him at all. Otherwise, we'll definitely die a graveless death in the future." If one couldn't rope in a genius, then the best method was to destroy that genius. Moreover, Yi Xian was a genius of Karaki Academy. He didn't want Karaki Academy to have another swordsman at the Sword Master or Sword Emperor realm as an enemy in the future. The Sword Master. The Sword Emperor. Li Xuanzang's expression gradually turned gloomy when he thought up to here. Right at this moment, a middle-aged man suddenly walked swiftly into the hall. "Dean Yi Xian, he's here." Everyone here was stunned when they heard this. Yi Xian is here? A man stood with a sword in hand at the foot of Xiao Dao, and a group of students from Karaki Academy were standing not too far away from him. All of them had vigilant expressions on their faces. The man raised his head to gaze at them. "Don't be nervous. I'm just here to practice my calligraphy." As soon as he finished speaking, he started to swing his sword. In next to no time, a row of large words appeared on the ground in front of him. "Hit me. Come at me." Chapter 79. The expressions of the students from Karaki Academy turned extremely unsightly when they heard this. This was a blatant insult to Karaki Academy. Some of the younger students were about to charge over when Li Xuanzang and the others appeared. Li Xuanzang threw a cold look at Yi Xian, who was not far away. He was about to speak, but Yi Xian turned around and left. He walked very quickly and vanished in the blink of an eye. Another line of words appeared behind Yi Xian. "Over 100 students, but none of them have balls." Li Xuanzang's expression was extremely gloomy when he saw this. The group of Karaki Academy students were so angry that their faces turned red. This was too fucking humiliating. Some students were about to charge at Yi Xian, but they were stopped by the instructors. Li Xuanzang glanced coldly at the students from Kuraki Academy. Return to the mountain. The students didn't dare to disobey him and walked back to the mountain unwillingly. A woman stared fixedly at Yi Xian's back. Why didn't you let me attack? Was Bei Qin. Kumu was standing beside Bei Qin. Kumu shook his head. I'm afraid that only the Inguesher who has left the Jiang country can suppress him. Bei Qin fell silent. Her strength was on par with Fenju. If Yi Xian could kill Fenju, then he could kill her as well. Kumu glanced at Yi Xian, who had vanished. He actually didn't die that day. This person is too mysterious. He turned to look at Bei Qin. You can't go look for him in private. Leave everything to the academy. Bei Qin remained silent. After Yi Xian left Kuraki Academy, he didn't stroll around. Instead, he prepared to return to Zhonglan Academy. He'd snuck into Kuraki Academy this time entirely because he couldn't stand the sight of Kuraki Academy, and he wanted to discuss them. Of course, if it was possible, he wanted to kill a few people as well. Ever since Kuraki Academy kidnapped his younger sister, he hated the academy to the extreme. If he were to bump into a student of Kuraki Academy on the street right now, he wouldn't hesitate to rush up and beat him to death. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stopped. In front of a house not far to his right, there was a little girl in a black dress squatting there. The little girl was about 12 or 13 years old. Her black dress was a little special, with a white skull flower painted on it. The little girl was carving a small piece of wood. Her technique was a little clumsy, and it was a little strenuous for her to carve. At this moment, the little girl suddenly looked up at Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian clearly saw the little girl's appearance. In terms of appearance, the little girl was not particularly good-looking. On the contrary, she was somewhat gloomy, especially her eyes. They gave off a very uncomfortable feeling, as if one look from her would kill them. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then he walked in front of the little girl. He squatted down and took the wood and carving knife from the little girl's hands. He smiled and said, "What do you want to carve?" The little girl glanced at Yi Xian, and then she pointed at the eaves in the distance. Yi Xian looked up and saw a pitch-black bird there. The bird was slightly strange and it only had one leg. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he started to carve quickly. Not long after, a lifelike bird appeared in front of the little girl. Carving. Actually, he liked to carve when he had nothing to do in the past. Because when they were young, the two of them were poor, and Yi Ling sometimes wanted toys. Naturally, he couldn't afford any toys, so he carved some small things for Yi Ling, and he was able to make Yi Ling happy every time. Over time, he could be considered a master carver. No matter what kind of bird, fish, or person it was, he could carve them lifelike. Of course, this skill was useless besides making Yi Ling happy. But to him, it was enough to make Yi Ling happy. Yi Xian handed the little bird in his hand to the girl in the black dress. He handed it to the black-dressed girl. "For you." The girl in the black dress took the wooden bird and looked at it. Then she looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled and said, "When carving you have to calm down. You can't rush it. The more anxious you are, the easier it is to make mistakes." As he spoke, he picked up a piece of wood beside the girl in the black dress, and then he started to carve quickly. Soon, a small wooden figure appeared in Yi Xian's hand. This small wooden figure was exactly the same as the girl in the black dress. When she saw the small wooden figure, the girl in the black dress was instantly attracted. Yi Xian handed the small wooden figure to the girl in the black dress and said with a smile, "For you." The girl in the black dress glanced at Yi Xian, and she took the small wooden figure, but she still didn't say anything. Yi Xian smiled, and then he touched the girl in the black dress's head. This touch was actually subconscious, or it should be said that it was a habit because he usually liked to touch Yi Ling's little head like this. At this moment, the girl in the black dress suddenly looked at him and she just looked at him. Yi Xian suddenly felt slightly flustered, inexplicably flustered. He frowned slightly and hurriedly calmed himself down. The girl in the black dress suddenly retracted her gaze and looked at the small wooden figure in her hand. Yi Xian instantly felt much better. Yi Xian glanced at the girl in the black dress before him. There wasn't the slightest fluctuation of profound energy on her body, and she looked like an ordinary person. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment. "Little girl, are you one of those extremely powerful and peerless experts?" The girl in the black dress glanced at Yi Xian and didn't say anything. Yi Xian chuckled, and then he secretly looked around and said softly, "Let me tell you a secret." The girl in the black dress looked at Yi Xian and still didn't say anything. Yi Xian moved his wrist slightly, and the Spirit Elegant Sword appeared in his hand. The girl in the black dress glanced at the Spirit Elegant Sword, and there was no fluctuation in her eyes. Yi Xian pointed at himself and said mysteriously, Swordsman, I'm the great swordsman. Impressive, right? The girl in the black dress blinked, and her expression was a little strange. Yi Xian subconsciously rubbed the girl's little head again, and then said with a smile, I still have something to do, so I'll be leaving first. With that said, he got up and walked into the distance. Soon Yi Xian disappeared from the sight of the black-dressed girl. The girl in the black dress retracted her gaze and looked at the small wooden figure in her hand. After a moment, she got up and looked at the one-legged bird not far away. Did you sense it? The one-legged bird shook its head. The girl in the black dress turned to look at the horizon and frowned slightly. A sword immortal has appeared in the country of Jiang, and we Dao protectors don't know anything about it. How ridiculous. With that said, she seemed to have thought of something and suddenly looked at the end of the street. At the end of the street, Yi Xian's figure had already disappeared, but the girl in the black dress could still see him. This person offended master, I'll go kill him. At this moment, the one-legged bird was about to fly away. The girl in the black dress stretched out her hand, and the one-legged bird landed firmly in her palm. The girl in the black dress said indifferently, this person's sword heart is clear and his heart is kind. He is a promising talent. Don't touch him and let him develop. In the future, if he is still as kind as he is today and his sword heart is clear, we can nurture him well and add another hero to our azure state. With that said, she turned and took a step forward. As soon as she took that step, she disappeared from sight. Yi Xian arrived at the foot of Tsanglan Academy's mountain. At this moment, a group of people surrounded him and there were many women among them. Young Master Yi, a youth walked in front of Yi Xian and bowed respectfully. I am the Yu family's heir Yu Lin. Young Master Yi, there is a banquet today and I would like to invite young Master Yi to participate. On the other side, another man hurriedly said, Young Master Yi, I would like to join Tsanglan Academy, please Yi. Young Master Yi, are you really a swordsman? Young Master Yi, this little girl greets you. Are you really a swordsman? Show me a few moves. Yi Xian fled. Back mountain. Yi Xian came to the waterfall, and Bai Zhe was still cultivating. At this moment, Bai Zhe's body actually had a faint red luster. At this moment, Bai Zhe suddenly glanced at Yi Xian. Don't cultivate? Even his words were trembling. Yi Xian nodded and said seriously, geniuses usually don't cultivate like me. Bai Zhe glared at Yi Xian. Go farther. Yi Xian chuckled. At this moment, a strong wind came from his right. Yi Xian suddenly turned around and punched out. Bang. A figure was blasted back, and at this moment, a cold light silently appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian dodged backwards and dodged the cold light. At this moment, an afterimage appeared in front of him again, and at the same time, a black rod suddenly smashed down from above his head. Yi Xian clenched his right hand into a fist. Bang. A fist aura swept out from his body, and it was this fist aura that forced the rod to stop. Yi Xian punched out. However, the figure was already 30 meters away. This figure was Mo Yunqi. Mo Yunqi sized up Yi Xian. How did your fist become so powerful again? Yi Xian didn't speak and he suddenly vanished on the spot. Seeing this scene, Mo Yunqi's expression changed slightly. He lightly tapped the ground with the tip of his foot, and his entire body instantly retreated 30 meters. At the same time, a flying knife flashed. Extremely fast. Bang. Yi Xian forcefully stopped, and he just stopped when another flying knife arrived in front of him. Right at this moment, a sword howl resounded, and then a flying sword slashed directly against the flying knife. Bang. The flying knife flew back to Mo Yunqi. Mo Yunqi chuckled. This flying knife of mine is formidable, right? Yi Xian suddenly looked at Mo Yunqi and then he said, Elder Ji? Mo Yunqi turned around instinctively, yet there was no one behind him. Shit. Mo Yunqi's expression changed drastically, and he hurriedly turned around. Bang. Along with a muffled bang, Mo Yunqi's figure was blasted flying, and he flew over 30 m away. On the ground, Mo Yunqi pointed angrily at Yi Xian. Yi Xian. You bastard. You actually played tricks. Are you even human? Yi Xian blinked. You can deceive me as well. Quickly tell me there's someone behind me. Mo Yunqi was infuriated to the point he almost spat blood. Motherfucker. Chapter 80. Yi Xian shrugged and turned to leave. Behind him, Mo Yunqi turned to look at Bai Zhe under the waterfall. Is this person shameless? Bai Zhe nodded his head seriously. Mo Yunqi shook his head. I have never seen such a shameless person. At this moment, Bai Zhe suddenly said, Are you done running? Hearing this, Mo Yunqi's expression changed. The next moment he disappeared on the spot. In a courtyard. Old Man Ji was lying on the recliner, drunk from the alcohol. Yi Xian suddenly appeared beside Old Man Ji. Yi Xian glanced at Old Man Ji and said, "Old Man Ji, I have something to discuss with you." Old Man Ji opened his drowsy eyes and glanced at Yi Xian. "Speak." Yi Xian thought for a moment. "I want to break through to the airborne realm." Airborne realm. He had been stuck at the chi-controlling realm for a long time. Now, he felt that he had reached the limit of the chi-controlling realm and could break through to the airborne realm at any time. Unfortunately, he could not break through like a normal person. He had to find spiritual swords. And he might need more than one spiritual sword. If he reached the airborne realm, his strength in all aspects would increase greatly. Most importantly, he would be able to fly. At that time, he would try to combine with a sword and see if he could use sword kinesis. Sword kinesis flight. He could use sword kinesis now, but he could not use sword kinesis flight. This was a pity. Old Man Ji nodded. Wanting to break through to the airborne realm is a good thing. Yi Xian hurriedly said, "But my body is a little special. If I want to break through to the airborne realm, I need spiritual swords. Old Man Ji, buy me a dozen spiritual swords." Old Man Ji, don't sleep. Wake up, damn it. In front of Yi Xian, Old Man Ji was already sleeping soundly. No matter how he called, he would not wake up. Seeing that Old Man Ji was pretending to sleep, Yi Xian was so angry that he almost pulled out his sword to kill him. However, when he thought of this old man's terrifying strength, he just thought about it. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly turned around. At the entrance of the courtyard stood a woman. Jianji. Jianji glanced at Yi Xian. "Follow me." With that, she turned around and left. Yi Xian looked at Old Man Ji in front of him, shook his head and sighed. Shameless. After saying that, he followed her out. Jianji brought Yi Xian to the back of the mountain. In a corner of the back of the mountain there were two small halls. The weeds around the two halls were almost as tall as an adult. It was very desolate. Jianji brought Yi Xian to the front of a small hall. Yi Xian looked up and saw two huge words above the small hall. Martial Arts Hall. Jianji said softly, "This place used to be the sacred land of my Tsanglan Academy." Yi Xian looked at the martial arts hall in front of him and asked, "Is there anything valuable inside?" Jianji turned and glared at Yi Xian. "This is the Holy Land." Yi Xian rolled his eyes. "I only know that our academy is so poor that we can barely afford to eat now." Jianji was silent for a moment and said softly, "Tsanglan Academy used to be very glorious, even more glorious than the current Kuraki College." Yi Xian said, "Then how did it end up like this?" Jianji shook her head. "Arrogance." "Arrogance?" Yi Xian didn't understand. Jianji said softly, "When a faction reaches a certain level like our Tsanglan Academy back then, even the royal family has to listen to us. Back then we were unprecedentedly arrogant and didn't put anyone in our eyes. Naturally we offended a lot of people. This is nothing. Back then Tsanglan Academy missed a student." Speaking of this, she looked at Yi Xian and said, "The legend of Kuraki College, Gu Qianqian. Back then he was actually a student of our Tsanglan Academy." Yi Xian was taken aback and then he asked, "Then why did you go to Kuraki Academy?" Jianji shook her head. "He was forced to leave." Finishing her sentence, she walked towards the martial arts hall. Whether it is a faction or a person, once they reach a certain level they will become arrogant. Once a person becomes arrogant they will lose themselves. It is the same for a faction. In the future we also paid a painful price for our arrogance back then. As she spoke, she suddenly stopped and turned around to look at Yi Xian. Back then, during the final battle between the two academies, the older generation didn't make a move. Almost all the students of our Tsanglan Academy were slaughtered. That year, the Shaodao in Tsang Mountain was filled with the heads of our Tsanglan Academy students. Yi Xian was silent. This world was cruel. When he was in Azure City, several small worlds were fighting for the resources around Azure City. Weren't there frequent bloody battles? But for Tsanglan Academy to end up like this, it made him think of 4 words. Extreme prosperity leads to decline. No matter if it was a person or a faction, once they reached a certain level, they would become arrogant and lose themselves. To him this was also a wake-up call. No matter how far one went in the future, one must not become arrogant. The two of them entered the main hall. Inside the main hall there were 9 long pillars. Each pillar was 6 meters tall, and there were unknown runes drawn around them. Jianji pointed at the 9 pillars. These 9 pillars were once the 9 Dao legacies, the legacies of the powerhouses of the Divine Central Continent's General Academy. Every year, new powerhouses would pass through these 9 pillars and pass on their martial arts here. When Sanglan Academy declined, the General Academy completely abandoned this place. The legacies here have not appeared for many, many years. Saying this, she laughed self-deprecatingly. They must have completely forgotten about us. Yi Xian was silent. He didn't particularly care about what had happened back then. All he knew was that old man Ji of Sanglan Academy had saved his sister and taken them in. This favor must be repaid. This was how Yi Xian lived. He would repay kindness with kindness and take revenge with enmity. Jianji walked up to one of the pillars and suddenly drew her saber and slashed. Crack. The pillar shattered with a loud bang. Jianji didn't stop there. Instead, she swung her saber swiftly, and in the next moment, all 9 pillars shattered with a loud bang. After the 9 pillars shattered, 9 crystals the size of fists appeared in the grand hall. What's this? Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. Jianji said softly, Jade Great Spirit Stones, the cornerstones of the 9 inheritance pillars. Each one should be able to sell for a good price, and they're the most valuable thing we have right now. Take them and sell them for swords. Saying this, she turned and left the martial arts hall. Inside the hall, Yi Xian gazed at the Jade Great Spirit Stones in front of him for a long time without saying anything. 15 minutes later, Yi Xian descended the mountain. In a certain courtyard, old man Ji sighed softly. Girl, that's your grandfather's wine money? Yi Xian headed straight for the Drunken Immortal Tavern. The Drunken Immortal Tavern was the largest merchant association in the imperial capital. If one wanted to buy or sell something, they could only come to them. At a certain street, Yi Xian suddenly stopped. Not far in front of him stood a man. The man was dressed in a white brocade robe and held a feather fan in his hand. He had a graceful bearing. Yi Xian glanced at the man. From Kuraki Academy? The man smiled slightly. Yes, you are Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared on the spot. Before he arrived, a terrifying fist aura had already enveloped the man. The man's eyes narrowed slightly, and there was a trace of shock in his eyes. He didn't dare to be careless. The folding fan in his hand spun slightly, and a sharp gust of wind slashed out like a blade. Boom! Along with the sound of an explosion, the 2 figures retreated rapidly. These 2 figures were Yi Xian and the man. But soon Yi Xian stopped, and in the next moment he appeared in front of the man again. The man's pupils constricted slightly. He swiftly closed his folding fan, and then flicked it upward, causing a ray of cold light to flash. Psst. The sound of something tearing resounded. However, the man himself had retreated explosively by over 30 m. Yi Xian glanced at his fist, and there was a bloody mark on it. Yi Xian shook his hand and then he slowly clenched his fist. Bang! The ground in front of Yi Xian instantly cracked apart, and then an invisible imposing aura swept towards the man like a storm. The man's eyes narrowed slightly. What a domineering fist aura! As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly let go of the folding fan in his hand. In the next moment, the folding fan slashed down like a sharp blade. Psst. An ear-piercing sound of something tearing resounded. The folding fan didn't just tear through the air, it tore through Yi Xian's imposing aura as well. However, Yi Xian had arrived in front of him, and Yi Xian didn't waste his breath and just smashed his fist forward. Force was very simple. Bang! The man retreated explosively by over 30 m while the folding fan was grabbed by Yi Xian. He'd intended to destroy it, but he noticed that it was actually a spirit artifact. He didn't hesitate to put the folding fan away. The man was speechless. After he put the folding fan away, Yi Xian gazed at the man. The man's eyes narrowed slightly. Looks like it won't be easy to take your head. You. Right at this moment, his voice suddenly stopped abruptly. Because Yi Xian had charged over and arrived in front of him. Another punch. However, this punch was utterly different from the punch from before, and the might of this punch was at least a few times stronger than the punch from before. Such a powerful contrast caused the man's expression to change drastically. He was just about to counterattack when a peerlessly formidable fist aura enveloped him. I'll blast your head apart with a single punch. The might of this punch instantly caused the man to feel despair. A moment of silence ensued. Bang! The man's head exploded, and Yi Xian was already several meters behind the man. Yi Xian glanced coldly at the surroundings. I'll kill every student of Kuraki Academy I see. After he finished speaking, he walked towards the distance. Ever since the students of Kuraki Academy had captured his younger sister, he could be said to hate this academy to the extreme. They could touch him, but they absolutely couldn't touch his younger sister. In the surroundings, some of the spectators looked at each other with shock in their eyes. The young man with the folding fan was at least a peak levitation realm expert. However, he'd been killed by a single punch from Yi Xian just like that? Somewhere, 3 men stared fixedly at Yi Xian, who was leaving in the distance. As for these 3 people, they were also students of Karaki Academy from elsewhere. After a moment, the man in a luxurious robe shook his head. "Return to the country." The man beside the luxurious robe said in a low voice, "Return to the country just like that? If we kill him, there's an earth-grade martial technique and a supreme-grade spirit stone." The luxurious robe glanced coldly at the man who spoke. "Do you have the life to take it?" The man's expression was somewhat ugly. The luxurious robe turned his head and glanced at the headless corpse in the distance. "This person's strength isn't the slightest bit weaker than the 3 of us, but he couldn't even take a single punch." As he spoke, he turned his head and glanced in the direction of Tsang Mountain. "This Yi Xian isn't an ordinary genius at all. This country of Zhang's Karaki Academy wants to kill him with a borrowed knife. We won't participate in this muddy water, nor do we have the strength to participate in it. Let's go." After he finished speaking, the man turned around and left without hesitation. After a moment of hesitation, the remaining 2 men also followed suit. Earth-grade martial technique and cultivation technique were very tempting, but one had to be alive to take it. Life was the most important thing. On the other side, a man in a black robe glanced at the corpse on the ground and chuckled, "Your strength isn't bad." As soon as he finished speaking, his entire body disappeared on the spot. At the end of the street, Yi Xian suddenly stopped. In front of him stood a black-robed man. The black-robed man gazed at Yi Xian and smiled. "You said that you would kill students of Karaki Academy on sight?" As he spoke, he waved his hand. "I'm from Karaki Academy as well. Why don't you give it a try?" Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. The corners of the man's mouth curled up slightly, and in the blink of an eye, a violent aura suddenly swept out from within him. Is this the Nether Passage realm? No, this is Half-Step Nether Passage. Someone exclaimed in shock. No wonder he's so confident. He's actually halfway into the Nether Passage realm. Right at this moment, the howl of a sword resounded. A single strike to decide life and death. This time Yi Xian had directly utilized his strongest attack. At the moment this attack appeared, the black-robed man's expression changed drastically, and his eyes were filled with astonishment. In the blink of an eye, the profound energy within his body surged madly. At the same time he suddenly punched forward. Bang! A strand of violent energy surged out from his fist, and it even emanated raging flames. Most importantly, this punch actually contained fist intent. A wave of exclamations resounded once more when they saw the fist intent. Fist intent. This meant that the black-robed young man was very likely to become a martial Dao Grandmaster. Or rather, he was already a quasi-martial Dao Grandmaster. At this moment Yi Xian's sword arrived. A moment of silence ensued. A head suddenly flew into the sky. It was the black-robed man's head. Behind the black-robed man, Yi Xian opened his palm, and a ray of sword light fell into his hand. The sword light dissipated, and it was the exquisite spirit sword. He sheathed the sword and quickly walked towards the distance. He would absolutely not fight for something that could be resolved with a single strike of the sword. So he used his strongest move. Everyone in the surroundings was dumbstruck. Another instant kill? Another instant kill? The minds of the spectators in the surroundings and some of the students of Karaki Academy that were hiding in the shadows had gone blank. A half-step Nether Passage quasi-martial Dao Grandmaster was instantly killed just like that? This wasn't a victory but an instant kill. An instant kill with a single strike of the sword. Moreover, many people hadn't been able to see that strike clearly. All they saw was a ray of light flash by, and then the black-robed man's head flew into the air. Exactly what level has Yi Xian attained? Right at this moment Yi Xian suddenly walked back. Under the gazes of the crowd, he walked up to the corpse of the black-robed man, and then he took a bag from the man's waist. Subsequently he turned around and left. Chapter 81. Poor. Extremely poor. That was exactly what Yi Xian was feeling right now. While he was in Two World City, he'd found out that Dao Yi's spiritual weapon was worth at least 2 million gold coins. Moreover, the sword might be even more expensive. Now he was so poor that he wanted to rob someone. It didn't take long for Yi Xian to arrive at the Inn of Indulgence. As soon as he produced his violet card, he was immediately invited into a luxurious room, and it was an old man who received him. The old man bowed slightly to Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, do you have any instructions for me? Yi Xian nodded, and then he produced the 9 jade grade spirit stones. How much can I sell them for? Jade grade spirit stones. There was a trace of surprise in the old man's eyes. There aren't many of them in the country of Jiang. As he spoke, he pondered deeply for a moment before he said, a single jade grade spirit stone is worth around 500,000 gold coins. 500,000 gold coins. Yi Xian pondered deeply for a moment, and then he said, at most it's only 4,500,000 gold coins? The old man nodded. Yi Xian asked another question. How much does a single spiritual sword cost? The old man glanced at Yi Xian. At least 3 million gold coins, and there might not be any on the market. Yi Xian laughed bitterly when he heard this. Now he knew why there were so few swordsmen. Damn it. This isn't something that ordinary people can afford to cultivate. A single spiritual sword costs 3 million gold coins. Not to mention a single person, even some great clans can't produce that much gold coins. Besides that, there's also the swordsman's sword technique, and all of that would probably be an enormous sum of money. Within the room, Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he withdrew a huge pile of things. All of them were spoils of war that he'd obtained from killing people, and there were all sorts of things. The most valuable amongst them was naturally the spiritual weapon that he'd just obtained. The old man's gaze paused on the fan for a moment, and then he said, Young Master Yi, forgive me for being blunt, but only this fan is worth a bit. The rest aren't worth much. Yi Xian nodded. Together, can we buy 2 spirit swords? The old man was in a difficult position. At this moment he was slightly taken aback. In the next moment he took a look outside the door and then looked at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi wants 2 spiritual swords? Yi Xian nodded. The old man smiled. It's fine. Young Master Yi is our honored guest. We will think of a way for young Master Yi. Please wait a moment, young Master Yi. After that he put away Yi Xian's things and left the private room. About an hour later the old man returned to the private room. In the old man's arms were 2 black boxes. The old man walked in front of Yi Xian. I've made young Master Yi wait for a long time. As he said that, he handed the 2 boxes to Yi Xian. These are 2 spiritual swords. Please have a look, young Master Yi. Yi Xian opened one of the boxes. Inside the box was a sword that was about 3 feet long. The sword was about 2 fingers wide and very sharp. Most importantly, this sword had a trace of spirituality. It was undoubtedly a spiritual sword. Yi Xian closed the box and then looked at the old man. My money shouldn't be enough to buy these 2 swords. The old man smiled. Young Master Yi is my Drunken Immortal Restaurant's honored guest. This little convenience is something my Drunken Immortal Restaurant can give. Yi Xian thought for a moment and then said, thank you. This was the Drunken Immortal Restaurant's goodwill, so he naturally wouldn't refuse. Seeing that Yi Xian didn't refuse, the old man's smile became even more brilliant. Also, young Master Yi must be careful of Karaki Academy. According to what we know, Karaki Academy has the intention to kill young Master Yi. My Drunken Immortal Restaurant has already investigated the incident that happened to young Master Yi on the cloud ship. It was Karaki Academy's doing. And they will surely not let it go. Young Master Yi, you must be careful when you're outside. Yi Xian nodded. Thank you for telling me. If your honorable restaurant has any other news, please let me know. I'll be eternally grateful. The old man smiled. Of course. Yi Xian cupped his fists. Farewell. With that said, he carried the 2 spiritual swords and turned to leave. After Yi Xian left, a black-robed old man appeared in the private room. This person was the 9th floor master of the Drunken Immortal Restaurant. The 9th floor master glanced at the direction that Yi Xian had left in and said, if I'm not in the imperial capital in the future, try to make things convenient for this person. Also, pay attention to Karaki Academy. If you discover anything, you can sell this young man a favor. The old man bowed slightly. Understood. The 9th floor master slowly closed his eyes. Karaki Academy, continue to court death. After Yi Xian left the Drunken Immortal Restaurant, he couldn't wait to rush towards Zhonglan Academy. 2 spiritual swords. Based on his current condition, if he was able to devour these 2 spiritual swords, he had an 80% chance of reaching the higher sky realm. Once he reached the higher sky realm, not only would his strength in all aspects improve greatly, most importantly, he would be able to attempt sword kinesis flight. If he was able to achieve sword kinesis flight and fly around the imperial capital, how cool would that be? Thinking of this, the corners of Yi Xian's mouth couldn't help but curl into a brilliant smile. Yi Xian increased his speed. Just as he was passing through a narrow street, he suddenly stopped. The street was only a few feet wide and there were houses and buildings on both sides. Most importantly, there wasn't a single person on this street. Something's not right. Yi Xian prepared to retreat. Although he was confident he wouldn't jump into a trap knowing that it was a trap. At this moment, behind him, a sound of wind breaking could be heard. Yi Xian squinted his eyes, turned around and threw a punch. Bam! Yi Xian took a few steps back and with every step he took, the ground beneath his feet instantly exploded. Yi Xian looked at his own fist. His fist was already red and there were bloodstains. He lifted his head and looked into the distance. Not far in front of him stood a man. The man was around 20 years old and his body was extremely burly, not much different from Bai Zai's. On his right fist there was a thick black metal glove. Spiritual weapon. Looking at the black metal glove, Yi Xian's eyes had a strange glint. The man had a ferocious expression. He glanced at Yi Xian with a ferocious smile on his face. Yi Xian was about to attack when he suddenly turned around. Not far behind him stood two men. The man on the left wore long cotton clothes and held a spear in his hand. The tip of the spear was like a cold star. The man on the right had short hair and held a crescent moon blade. The blade was pitch black and thick and the blade was extremely thin. There were 3 black iron rings on the back of the blade. All 3 of them were in the levitation realm. No, it should be said that all 3 of them had reached the half-step ethereal opening realm. At this moment, the man in cotton clothes with the spear in his hand suddenly said, "The 3 of us saw you fight earlier. I never expected that besides Guoshiren, there would be a monster like you in Jiang country." As he spoke, he walked slowly towards Yi Xian. "In a one-on-one battle, the 3 of us aren't a match for you, so..." Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly charged forward. This charge caused him to arrive around 3 m away from the man with the spear. However, his expression suddenly changed and he dodged to the right in the next moment. There was a black arrow stuck in his shoulder. Yi Xian raised his head and looked into the distance. A woman in tight black clothes was standing on the roof of a house in the distance. She held a bow in her hand and carried a quiver of arrows on her back. It wasn't 3 people but 4. Yi Xian glanced coldly at the woman on the roof, and then he broke the arrow in his shoulder. Right at this moment, the sound of wind being torn apart resounded abruptly from behind him. Subsequently, the robust man appeared behind Yi Xian, and he smashed his fist towards Yi Xian's head. His fist was like a ferocious tiger that had left its cage, and it carried a domineering aura that seemed capable of devouring its enemies. A wisp of a ferocious smile appeared on the corners of Yi Xian's mouth, and then he suddenly turned around and swung his fist. A punch to the head. The ground beneath his feet instantly cracked apart, and it wasn't just his feet that cracked apart, even the walls on both sides of him cracked apart. Fist against fist. Bang. An explosion resounded as the robust man's black gloves split apart. At the same time he retreated by over 10 m, and every step he took left a deep hole in the ground. The robust man glanced at his right hand, and his entire right hand was trembling violently. At this moment, there was astonishment in the robust man's eyes. He mainly cultivated the body, and he rarely lost to anyone in the same realm of cultivation in terms of physical strength. But the person before him was a swordsman. After he blasted the robust man back with a single punch, Yi Xian was just about to follow up with another attack. However, right at this moment he suddenly turned around and a spear had arrived in front of him. The tip of the spear was spinning, and it carried a sharp spear light. Yi Xian's figure dodged to the side and missed this spear strike. However, right at this moment the spear suddenly swept horizontally. Yi Xian wasn't able to dodge in time, and he could only raise his arms to block in front of him. Bang! Yi Xian was directly sent flying into the wall by the force of the spear, and at this moment, a man suddenly flew in front of Yi Xian, and then a long saber slashed down fiercely. The momentum of this saber was complete, and its power was unparalleled. There was no time to dodge because this saber and the spear were connected too closely. Yi Xian's hands suddenly clasped together. Bang! This time, his hands directly clasped the long saber, but his feet sank deep into the ground. At this moment, a spear suddenly stabbed at his abdomen. Yi Xian released the long saber and rolled to the side. Bang bang. The ground where he was originally standing was directly cut into a deep ravine by the long saber, and the wall behind him was instantly penetrated. After dodging the spear and the saber, Yi Xian had yet to stand firm when an overbearing force suddenly attacked him from behind. Yi Xian turned around and in front of him was that burly man. The burly man leaped into the air, and a fist smashed fiercely towards Yi Xian's head. The man's fist flashed with a pitch-black fist light. The corner of Yi Xian's mouth suffused with a hint of savagery. He did not retreat but also blasted a punch upwards. Another head-on clash. Still a punch to the head. This punch not only had fighting spirit, but also a powerful and overbearing fist momentum. The moment the two fists collided, bang! The burly man's entire body was instantly sent flying several feet away to the ground. Yi Xian was also shaken to the point where he retreated several feet. And at this moment, there was a faint sound of wind breaking. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically, and he dodged to the side, but it was still a little too late. There was an arrow stuck in his right shoulder. Yi Xian raised his head to look at the eaves in the distance. The woman's right hand pulled the bow into a full moon shape, and an arrow was aimed at him, ready to shoot. The woman in black looked coldly at Yi Xian, and just as she was about to release the tail of the arrow, she suddenly turned around, and a cold light slashed down from above her head. The woman in black's pupils constricted slightly, and with a light tap of her toes, her entire body directly floated to the other side of the house. In the place where she had been standing, stood a woman in a rainbow-colored dress. Jianji. At the same time, two figures suddenly landed on the left and right sides of Yi Xian. The people who came were Mo Yunqi and Bai Zhe. 4 against 4. Yi Xian glanced at the two of them, and just as he was about to make a move, Mo Yunqi suddenly stopped Yi Xian with his right hand. Wait! Yi Xian and Bai Zhe looked at Mo Yunqi, and Mo Yunqi snorted, "Previously you were the one in the limelight and the girls in the imperial capital only know you, Yi Xian. Don't make a move now and watch my performance. Let me deal with them." As he spoke, he rushed towards the man in plain clothes and the other person in the distance. And in the distance the two people also disappeared at the same time. There was a moment of silence. Bang! Mo Yunqi smashed heavily in front of Yi Xian and Bai Zhe, and a trace of blood slowly flowed from the corner of his mouth. Bai Zhe looked at Mo Yunqi. Mo Yunqi, are you showing us how to be beaten? Chapter 82. Yi Xian walked over to Mo Yunqi and pulled him up. Mo Yunqi wiped off the blood on the corners of his mouth and gazed at the two people in the distance. Very strong. Very strong. Yi Xian nodded. He'd fought them earlier, and even he wasn't 100% confident in his ability to defeat them. There were many geniuses and monstrous geniuses in this world. Moreover, Karaki Academy had offered such generous conditions, so many people would definitely be tempted. Not to mention others, even he himself was slightly tempted. An Earth-rank martial technique was enough to buy numerous spirit swords. Yi Xian restrained his thoughts and glanced at Bai Zhe and Mo Yunqi. Both of you pick one. Bai Zhe turned around and looked at the robust man in the distance. Bai Zhe didn't waste his breath and charged directly at the robust man. The robust man refused to show weakness, and he leaped up and shot explosively towards Bai Zhe. Bang! 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 In next to no time, numerous explosions resounded behind Yi Xian and Mo Yunqi. Yi Xian turned his head to look at Mo Yunqi. Mo Yunqi went silent for a moment, and then he looked at the man who held a crescent blade nearby. In the next moment his entire body charged out like a gust of wind. In the distance, the man with the crescent blade had no fear on his face, and he leaped up and slashed fiercely forward. This slash slashed through the air. Mo Yunqi had already appeared behind the man, and the man's reaction was extremely swift. He turned around and slashed with his blade. On the roof, Jianji leaped up and charged towards the black-clothed woman, and the black-clothed woman dodged backwards repeatedly. At the same time numerous arrows shot towards Jianji incessantly, and Jianji didn't dare be careless when facing these arrows. In the small alley, only Yi Xian and the plain-clothed man had yet to fight. The plain-clothed man glanced at Yi Xian. "We'll leave the imperial capital." Yi Xian shook his head. "If you said that before my brothers arrived I would have agreed. But now, it's too late." As soon as his voice fell, Yi Xian suddenly leaped forward. This leap had the momentum of a ferocious tiger pouncing on its prey. The spear-wielding man gripped the spear tightly in his right hand. The spear in his hand trembled violently, and the ground beneath his feet began to crack. After a moment of silence, the man thrust his spear upwards. On the tip of the spear light flickered and a powerful force poured out. The walls on both sides of the man shattered. Right at this moment, a ray of light flashed, and then the surroundings suddenly fell silent. Yi Xian was already not far behind the man. A drop of blood slowly dripped from the tip of his elegant sword. Yi Xian turned to look in the distance. At this moment, Bai Zhe was engaged in a fierce battle with a burly man. Both of them cultivated their bodies, so when they fought, their fists naturally landed on each other's flesh. However, Bai Zhe clearly had the upper hand. The burly man retreated continuously, and his body was covered in cracks. On the contrary, Bai Zhe was becoming more and more ferocious as he fought. Yi Xian sized up Bai Zhe and he was slightly shocked in his heart. Or rather, it should be said that he was shocked. If it was just based on his body alone, even if he cultivated to the concealed realm, he wouldn't have any advantage against Bai Zhe in terms of his body alone. If he hadn't cultivated to the golden body realm, he probably wouldn't even be able to take a single punch from Bai Zhe. Bang! At this moment, the burly man in the distance was sent flying. Tens of feet away, the burly man landed heavily on the ground. Just as he was about to get up, Bai Zhe suddenly descended from the sky and stepped on the burly man's head. Bang! The burly man's head sank into the ground, and his body twitched for a while before he stopped moving. Bai Zhe seized the burly man's black iron fists, and then he snatched the pouch from the burly man's waist. After that, he walked over to Yi Xian, waved the black gloves in his hands and grinned. A spiritual weapon. Yi Xian nodded. It's worth at least 2 million gold coins. Bai Zhe grinned. I finally know why you like to fight. Remember to bring me along when you fight in the future. Yi Xian was speechless. Bang! Suddenly, an explosion resounded from afar. Yi Xian and Bai Zhe turned to look. Not far away, Mo Yunqi was blasted back tens of meters. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian frowned slightly, and he and Bai Zhe were about to attack when Mo Yunqi suddenly said, "You guys watch, I'll do it myself." Yi Xian and Bai Zhe hesitated for a moment, and in the end they didn't choose to attack. They believed in Mo Yunqi. If this fellow really couldn't win, he would definitely run faster than anyone else. Suddenly, Mo Yunqi formed a seal with his hands, and in the blink of an eye, a figure appeared behind the man with the blade. It was Mo Yunqi, but Mo Yunqi was still at his original position. Two Mo Yunqis? Both Yi Xian and Bai Zhe were stunned by this scene. It wasn't just them, even the man with the blade was stunned. Right at this moment, two rays of cold light flashed. Flying daggers. Two flying daggers shot towards the man with the blade, and they were extremely swift. Even Yi Xian and Bai Zhe weren't able to see their trajectories clearly. The man's pupils constricted slightly because he noticed that both of them were actually real. He didn't have the time to think about anything else, and he suddenly swung his blade horizontally. A crescent-shaped ray of light surged forward, and it forcefully stopped the two flying daggers. However, right at this moment, another flying dagger flashed. In the blink of an eye, the knife-wielding man's body stiffened. An inch-long throwing knife was stuck in his throat. Yi Xian and Bai Zhe gazed at Mo Yunqi. At this moment, Mo Yunqi's countenance was slightly pale. Yi Xian walked over to him. Are you all right? Mo Yunqi hurriedly straightened his back. Do I look like I'm not all right? Yi Xian patted Mo Yunqi lightly on the shoulder. Go back and have a good rest. As he spoke, he picked up the man's blade and the money pouch on his waist, and then he passed it to Mo Yunqi. This blade is a spirit artifact as well, and it's worth at least 2 million gold coins. Do you want it? If you don't. Mo Yunqi grabbed the blade and the money pouch, and then he glared at Yi Xian. Why are you acting like a bandit? Yi Xian was speechless. 2 million gold coins. Mo Yunqi's eyes were filled with shock as he glanced at the blade in his hand. After all, even though there were spirit artifacts in his original clan, they weren't something that he could obtain. Moreover, 2 million gold coins was a huge sum of money to his clan. Mo Yunqi sighed lightly. Bandit Yi, I finally know why you like to fight. You can get rich by fighting. As he spoke, he glanced at Yi Xian. The next time you fight, please call me along or else we won't be brothers. Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, the three of them suddenly raised their heads and looked at the rooftop in the distance. On the rooftop, Jianji was knocked back by an arrow, and the woman in black didn't attack again. Instead, she turned around and flew into the distance. Her speed was extremely fast like a goshawk. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. Kill. As he spoke, he stomped his right foot on the ground and his entire body flew into the air, but very quickly he landed again. Mo Yunqi and Bai Zhe looked at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian's expression was a little awkward, because he was only at the qi-controlling realm and couldn't fly at all. Bai Zhe looked at Mo Yunqi. The fastest person in the field was definitely Mo Yunqi, but Mo Yunqi shook his head. I consumed too much energy just now and can't increase my speed at all. Yi Xian nodded. I'm fine. As he spoke, he seemed to have thought of something and he looked at Mo Yunqi and Bai Zhe. Why did the two of you come here? Mo Yunqi spoke in a low voice. It was old man Ji who informed us that you were being ganged up on, and then we came. When he spoke up to here, he hesitated for a moment and then he said, Bandit Yi, to be honest, even though your strength is only slightly inferior to mine, you should know by now how many people want to kill you. If you want to leave the mountain next time, it's better to call the three of us along. The more people, the more insurance. Yi Xian was speechless. Bai Zhe glanced at Mo Yunqi. Both of you are shameless. He knew that Yi Xian was very shameless, and now it seemed like Mo Yunqi's was extremely shameless as well. Mo Yunqi glared at Bai Zhe. People like you won't live long in chivalrous novels. Bai Zhe glanced at Mo Yunqi. Believe it or not, I'll send you flying. Mo Yunqi retreated a few feet and he waved at Bai Zhe. Come over here. Bai Zhe's eyes twitched and he directly ignored Mo Yunqi and then looked at Yi Xian. Let's go back. Yi Xian nodded and he looked at Jianji, who was on the eaves. Fudi Ji. Oh no, great beauty Ji, let's go. Fudi Ji? Jianji glanced at Yi Xian, and his expression was unfriendly. Yi Xian secretly cursed and he was stunned, then he pointed at Mo Yunqi, who was not far away. He said that you're a foodie. Mo Yunqi was stunned. At this moment Yi Xian turned to look at Bai Zhe. It was Mo Yunqi who said it, right? Bai Zhe glanced at Yi Xian, and at this moment Yi Xian opened his mouth. Do you want to eat? There was only the movement of his lips, no sound. Bai Zhe obviously understood what he meant. He turned to look at Mo Yunqi, who was not far away. He said it. Damn. Mo Yunqi jumped, and at this moment, a saber light suddenly descended from the sky, directly towards Mo Yunqi. Mo Yunqi's expression changed drastically and he turned to run. You two bastards. Beside Yi Xian, Bai Zhe suddenly said, I want to eat roasted chicken tonight. Yi Xian nodded. No problem. Just like that, the two of them walked into the distance side by side. After a while, the two of them came to a dense forest, and after passing through this dense forest, they reached the foot of Mount Azure Billow. At this moment, two explosions suddenly sounded in the dense forest, and soon two figures retreated from the dense forest. It was Mo Yunqi and Jianji. At this moment, there was blood at the corner of their mouths, and not only that, there were two arrows stuck in Jianji's shoulders, and there was also an arrow stuck in Mo Yunqi's right thigh. Their bodies weren't as strong as Yi Xian's, so the arrows had directly pierced through them. Yi Xian and Bai Zhe's expressions changed drastically when they witnessed this scene, and they hurriedly charged over. Meanwhile, a man and a woman walked out from the dense forest. The woman was the black-clothed woman that had fled earlier. On the other hand, the man was around the age of 20, wore a large ink-colored robe, had black hair that hung loosely on his shoulders, and there was a pitch-black snake coiled on his shoulder. Mo Yunqi, who stood by Yi Xian's side, spoke in a low voice. Watch out, that man is very strong. Yi Xian raised his head to look at the man and the man grinned. Chu Kingdom Karaki Academy's inner court leader Feng Yixio, ranked 19th on the Pine Prefecture martial rankings. Yi Xian suddenly walked slowly towards the man, and a sword silently appeared in his hand. Yi Xian looked Feng Yixio in the eyes. Jiang Kingdom, Azure Wave Academy. Yi Xian, ranked first on the Pine Prefecture martial rankings. Behind him, Mo Yunqi was stunned, and then he said, Bandit Yi, when did you become the first? Yi Xian didn't even turn around. First from the bottom won't do. As soon as he finished speaking, his speed suddenly increased and it grew faster and faster. Chapter 83. The Martial Rankings. Yi Xian had heard of it before. Legend had it that it was a ranking in Azure Prefecture. As for who established it, no one knew. All they knew was that those who could make it onto the rankings were the most monstrous geniuses in Azure Prefecture. And in the entire state of Jiang, only one person made it onto the rankings. In Lanxiu. Yi Xian didn't underestimate Feng Yixio, but he didn't fear him either. Yi Xian's speed grew faster and faster, and the spirit gray sword in his hand trembled violently. Feng Yixio, who stood before Yi Xian, had a smile on his face and his eyes were solemn. He didn't underestimate Yi Xian either. How could someone who could make Karaki Academy pay such a terrifying price to kill be an ordinary person? Those who could make it onto the martial rankings weren't weak, be it in terms of strength or intelligence. On the contrary, those who could make it onto the rankings were people who had experienced countless battles, and they knew very well how foolish it was to underestimate someone during a battle. It was fine to underestimate an enemy, but it had to be after the enemy was dead. By Feng Yixio's side, the woman in black drew her bow and aimed it at the charging Yi Xian. Meanwhile, Feng Yixio's right hand pressed down on the woman's bow. I'll do it myself. As soon as he finished speaking, he looked at Yi Xian, who stood before him. At this moment, Yi Xian was less than a few meters away from Feng Yixio. At this moment, a terrifying aura suddenly enveloped Feng Yixio. Sword aura. At this moment, the feeling that Yi Xian gave others was like a sword that could pierce through the sky. The woman in black by Feng Yixio's side had a trace of disbelief in her eyes. This sort of aura shouldn't appear on a chi-controlling realm cultivator. Feng Yixio's expression was indifferent as he suddenly opened his right palm. In the next moment, a strange white vortex appeared around his palm, and at this moment, the ground beneath his feet warped and became illusory. Yi Xian had arrived and his sword descended. A single strike to decide life and death. A single strike seemed to be able to shatter the ground, and the sword aura was extremely domineering. Meanwhile, Feng Yixio raised his right hand slightly, and in an instant, the white vortex in his hand swallowed Yi Xian's sword. Bang! With the two of them as the center, the ground within a radius of several hundred zhang violently trembled and then cracked. At the same time, the two of them retreated over 100 feet, and in front of them was a ravine that was at least half a foot deep. The surroundings were a complete mess. Yi Xian looked at the spirit elegant sword in his hand, then looked up at Feng Yixio who was nearby. Nether Passage Realm. The strength of the person in front of him was not at Ascension Realm at all. It was the Nether Passage Realm. A Nether Passage Realm cultivator in his 20s. In the distance, Feng Yixio glanced at his right hand. His entire right arm had cracked. If he had underestimated his opponent in the slightest and didn't use his full strength, he would have been severely injured even if he didn't die. Feng Yixio lifted his head to look at Yi Xian. As expected of a swordsman, to have such terrifying combat strength at the chi-controlling realm. What a surprise. Yi Xian did not say anything. Instead, he raised his sword and charged at Feng Yixio. When he fought, he never liked to waste words. This was a battle of life and death, not a game. What was the point of talking so much? It was meaningless. Winning was the most important thing. Yi Xian's speed was extremely swift, and it grew faster and faster. The spirit elegant sword in his hand trembled violently while a sharp and fierce glow emanated from it. Feng Yixio slowly closed his eyes, and then an invisible aura appeared out of thin air around him. The aura of a Nether Passage Realm expert. At the same time, the ground beneath his feet trembled violently while countless bits of rock suddenly condensed in front of him. His right palm faced down as he spoke in a light voice, "Earth roar." As soon as his voice resounded, bang! The ground beneath Feng Yixio's feet trembled violently. In the blink of an eye, the entire ground was suddenly lifted up, and the ground that had been lifted up seemed like a tornado that swept towards Yi Xian. The expressions of Bai Zhe and the others instantly changed when they witnessed this scene. It possessed a trace of the might of the heavens and the earth. In other words, the martial technique Feng Yixio executed was at least at the earth rank. The might of an earth rank martial technique executed by a Nether Passage Realm expert was extraordinarily terrifying. Right at this moment, a sword howl resounded, and then a strand of sword light slashed down from afar. Bang! Along with a world-shaking explosion, two figures retreated repeatedly amidst the rubble and dirt. It was exactly Yi Xian and Feng Yixio. During the process of his retreat, Yi Xian suddenly relaxed his right hand, and then the spirit elegant sword in his hand transformed into a strand of sword light that slashed forward. Feng Yixio stood in front of Yi Xian with his right palm facing down before he raised it up. Bang! Countless bits of rock instantly converged together and blocked Yi Xian's attack. However, his entire body was blasted back by over 10 m. As soon as he stopped moving, Yi Xian appeared in front of him once more. Feng Yixio suddenly stomped his right foot on the ground, and then his figure shot forward explosively. Bang! Both of them separated as soon as they collided, and they both returned to where they stood earlier. As soon as Yi Xian descended to the ground beneath his feet instantly cracked apart, and he raised his head to gaze at Feng Yixio with a calm expression. The Nether Passage Realm. There was a huge difference between the Nether Passage Realm and the Levitation Realm. Upon reaching the Nether Passage Realm, one would not only be able to fly in the air, but would also be able to control a trace of the power of space. If one could control a trace of the power of space, it would be of great help to one's own body. The most obvious benefit was that one would be able to maximize the power of some Earth-rank martial skills when using martial skills. This was because some martial skills required one's own strength to support them, especially Earth-rank martial skills. If one's own strength was insufficient, one would not be able to display the full power of such martial skills. Moreover, even if one forcefully used such martial skills, there was a possibility of a backlash. As for Feng Yixio, although he was at the Nether Passage Realm, it was obvious that he had just reached it, and he was not very adept at using the power of space. If the other party had really grasped the power of space, when he thought of this, Yi Xian's expression gradually turned solemn. He was never blindly arrogant, nor would he lose himself. He would thoroughly analyze his and his opponent's strengths and weaknesses. Raise the realm. At this moment Yi Xian deeply felt that his realm was insufficient. If he could not quickly reach the levitation realm, he might not be able to put up a fight against an opponent at the Nether Passage realm in the future. Opposite Yi Xian, Feng Yixio's expression was also incomparably solemn. This was because Yi Xian's battle prowess had greatly exceeded his expectations. From the beginning of the fight he had not held back at all. He had even used an earth-rank martial skill in the first round. However, he still could not do anything to the person before him. Moreover, Yi Xian was only at the qi-controlling realm. If Yi Xian reached the levitation realm or the qi-controlling realm, when he thought of this, Feng Yixio's tightly clenched fists slowly relaxed. Killing intent? For a moment there was. However, it was only for a moment because he did not have any deep enmity with Yi Xian. Since there was no deep enmity with this kind of person, why would they become mortal enemies? Feng Yixio turned his head to look in a certain direction. There, an old man holding a walking stick had quietly appeared. When they saw this old man, the expressions of Yi Xian and the others changed slightly. This old man might be on the same level as Old Man Ji. The old man with the walking stick walked in front of Yi Xian. He sized up Yi Xian, and there was a trace of a complicated look in his eyes. I heard that you wanted to join this country of Zhang's Kuraki Academy? Yi Xian nodded. They didn't want you? The old man with the walking stick asked. Yi Xian nodded again. The old man with the walking stick shook his head and sighed. They're all a bunch of retards. As he spoke, he turned his head to look at Feng Yixio, who was not far away, and then said, No discord, no concord. How about we be friends? Yi Xian was silent. The old man with the walking stick smiled slightly. I know, my disciple hurt your friend. As he spoke, he suddenly pointed with his finger. 2 white jade bottles appeared in front of Mo Yunqi and Ji Anji respectively. At the same time, a golden flying knife appeared in front of Mo Yunqi, and a long knife that emitted raging flames appeared in front of Ji Anji. 2 supreme-grade spirit weapons. Mo Yunqi and Ji Anji were both stunned. The old man with the walking stick smiled slightly and was very amiable. In the bottle there are top-grade golden sore pills. The market price should be 300,000 gold coins each, and there are 5 pills in each bottle. As for the golden flying knife, it is a supreme-grade spirit weapon that I obtained by chance. As for the long knife, it is called Scarlet Flame, and it is also a supreme-grade spirit weapon. If the 2 of them have other opportunities, they can upgrade these 2 supreme-grade spirit weapons to the light grade. Hearing this, Ji Anji, who was not far away, put away the white jade bottle and the Scarlet Flame. Especially the Scarlet Flame, Ji Anji's eyes were filled with undisguised joy. Mo Yunqi also hurriedly put away the white jade bottle and the flying knife. Looking at the golden flying knife in his hand, Mo Yunqi was already grinning from ear to ear. Supreme-grade spirit weapon. He had not even touched it before. Bai Zhe glanced at Mo Yunqi, and his eyes were filled with disdain. Useless. In the distance, Yi Xian looked at the old man with the walking stick. Why? The old man with the walking stick smiled. We just want to be friends with you. Yi Xian fell silent. The old man with the walking stick still had a smile on his face. If you think it's not possible, then it's fine. If there's a chance in the future, you can get to know my disciple again. Yi Xian shook his head. That's not it. It's just that. When he spoke up to here, he glanced at Mo Yunqi and Ji Anji, and then he said, all of them have things to take, but I don't. The old man's expression froze slightly. In next to no time he roared with laughter, and then he flicked his finger. A sword floated in front of Yi Xian. A supreme-grade spirit sword. Yi Xian hurriedly put his sword away and was about to speak. Meanwhile, Bai Zhe spoke abruptly. What about me? Yi Xian was speechless. Mo Yunqi glanced at Bai Zhe while a cold smile arose on the corners of his mouth. Useless. The old man with the walking stick glanced at Bai Zhe, and he hesitated for a moment before he said, My young friend, you cultivate your body. This old man doesn't have anything suitable for you. How about this, I'll give you an extra bottle of medicinal pills. As he spoke, he flicked his finger, and a white jade bottle appeared in front of Bai Zhe. Bai Zhe didn't refuse, and he put the white jade bottle away. This was worth a lot of money. The old man with the walking stick glanced at Yi Xian, and then he smiled. Then the 3 of us will be taking our leave. If you have time, you can come to Chu Kingdom as guests. As soon as he finished speaking, he glanced at a certain place on the right, and then he turned around and disappeared into the distance with Feng Yixio and the woman in black. Yi Xian hurriedly said, Come often in the future. Somewhere in the sky, the old man with the walking stick trembled slightly. In the sky, Feng Yishio suddenly said, "Master, why do you have to be so generous?" The old man with the walking stick said indifferently, "All of you underestimated the Yi Xian, and I also underestimated that old man." When he heard this, Feng Yishio understood. After an instant he seemed to have thought of something and he said, "They are so poor, and their skin is so thick." Chapter 84. At the foot of Mount Azure Billow, Yi Xian and the others were beaming with joy. The four of them had gained a lot. Poor. The four of them were undoubtedly very poor because the current Azure Billow Academy didn't have any cultivation resources at all. Not to mention cultivation resources, they even had to settle their own meals. As for spirit artifacts, they couldn't even think about it, let alone top-grade spirit artifacts. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly sheathed his sword and glanced at Jianji and the others. "Everyone come over." The four of them gathered together. Yi Xian looked at Jianji and Mo Yunqi. "Are your injuries serious?" Both of them shook their heads and Mo Yunqi said, "They're just external injuries, not particularly serious." Yi Xian nodded and then he gestured for everyone to sit down. The four of them sat on the ground. Jianji and the others looked at Yi Xian, waiting for him to continue. Yi Xian thought for a moment and then said in a deep voice, "We won the battle in the alley. But we didn't win the battle just now." Jianji and the others fell silent. Yi Xian looked at the three of them. "After the battle in the alley and the battle just now, I believe that the Kuraki students from other places have a rough understanding of our strength. In other words, our next opponents will be stronger and more numerous." Mo Yunqi grinned, "Don't be afraid, just fight." Yi Xian looked at Mo Yunqi. "What if we can't win?" Mo Yunqi fell silent. Yi Xian said softly, "Our opponents will be stronger and stronger, and there might even be some unimaginable monstrous geniuses like Missen." Hearing this, Mo Yunqi and the others' expressions gradually became serious. Because such a thing was completely possible, and the rewards offered by Kuraki Academy were really too tempting. With such a generous reward, there would definitely be many true super monstrous geniuses, and Feng Yishio was the most obvious example. This was someone on the martial roll of honor. And Feng Yishio was only ranked towards the back of the martial roll. What if all the monstrous geniuses ranked higher came? At this moment all four of them felt pressured. Yi Xian continued, "There's one more thing. Kuraki Academy might use some other dirty tricks. Since we've already reached this point, it can be said that if we don't die, it'll be them. Therefore they definitely won't let this go." As he spoke, he stood up. "The three of you, our current situation can be said to be hopeless. It is hopeless. We have no way out and there may be no way out in front of us. Old Man Ji was good at fighting, but he couldn't beat many of them. If we want to survive, we can only rely on ourselves. Push yourselves a bit." With that he turned around and left. In the same place, Mo Yunqi muttered softly, "This guy is giving me a lot of pressure all of a sudden." Bai Zhe didn't say anything. He stood up and walked up the mountain. Invincible sword body technique, using one's body to forge a sword. Yi Xian took a deep breath. At this moment he felt that his entire body was filled with energy. He raised his head to look at the spiritual beauty sword. With a gentle wave of his right hand, the spiritual beauty sword flew into his hand. The moment he held the spiritual beauty sword, it trembled slightly and let out an ear-piercing sword cry. Upper grade bright sword. Bright swords were divided into three small grades: lower grade, upper grade, and supreme grade. After he absorbed the three spiritual swords, not only did he reach levitation sword, but his spiritual beauty sword also reached upper grade bright sword. Both improved. And after he reached levitation realm, his overall strength would increase by a large margin. In addition to the improvement of his sword, if he were to go against Feng Yishio now, he had at least 60 to 70% confidence in killing him. The reason why he was not 100% confident was because the other party definitely had a trump card. This kind of demon-like genius would definitely have a trump card. As though he had thought of something, Yi Xian suddenly raised his head to look at the entrance of the second level. Looking at the entrance he snorted, "Pot." At this moment, following the crisp sound of a slap, Yi Xian was sent flying out of the prison pagoda. In reality, Yi Xian was sprawled on the ground and his body was trembling non-stop. After a while he got up. Yi Xian rubbed his face and shook his head with a bitter smile. He had thought that when he reached levitation realm, he would at least be able to exchange a few blows with the other party. However, reality told him that he was still a little brother. He could not be provoked. After Yi Xian tidied up, he left the room and went to the back mountain. He came to the front of the huge mountain that he used to cultivate on. He walked quickly to the peak of the mountain, or rather, he flew. Levitation realm. The current him could already use chi to fly in the air. Of course, his goal was not to fly in the air. As a swordsman, flying on a sword was, of course, flashy. Sword kinesis flight. He had been looking forward to it for a long time. Soon Yi Xian arrived at the peak of the mountain. Looking down from the peak, it was at least 200 feet high. It was a little high. Yi Xian was a little hesitant. If he jumped down like this, what if he failed to fly on his sword and could not get up? In the end, he did not choose to jump down like this. With a slight thought, the spirit elegant sword flew out from his body and floated steadily in front of him. Under his control, the spirit elegant sword lay horizontally under his feet. Soon he stood on the sword. However, the spirit elegant sword could not bear his weight at all and fell directly to the ground. Seeing this, Yi Xian frowned. This doesn't seem right, because he realized that the sword could not bear his body at all. What should he do? Yi Xian frowned. He really wanted to ask the mysterious woman because she would definitely be able to answer his questions. Unfortunately, the mysterious woman was still in a deep sleep. As for the guy on the second level, he did not want to provoke him. That guy would give him a slap for no reason. Now he could only rely on himself. On the peak of the mountain, Yi Xian looked at the spirit elegant sword in his hand for a long time. Suddenly his eyes lit up. The sword can split mountains and shatter rocks. With such strength, how could it not bear the weight of a person? Thinking of this, it was as if a window had been opened and countless thoughts surged into his mind. If he wanted to fly on his sword, he had to make the sword stronger. Yi Xian held the spirit elegant sword in his hand. The spirit elegant sword vibrated violently, and soon, a sharp and dazzling sword ray was emitted from the sword. He slowly released his right hand. He did not cut off his connection with the spirit elegant sword. Instead, he continued to work hard to activate the spirit elegant sword. After a while, his body slowly floated up. Soon, he stepped on the spirit elegant sword with both feet. The spirit elegant sword lowered slightly but did not land on the ground. It carried him. Seeing this, Yi Xian was wild with joy. There was hope. He hurriedly calmed himself down. Soon, he activated the spirit elegant sword beneath his feet by using chi to control the sword. The spirit elegant sword started to vibrate violently, but it was moving slowly. Sensing this, the corners of Yi Xian's mouth gradually curled up. Soon, the curvature of the corners of his mouth widened. Just like that, Yi Xian stood on the spirit elegant sword and slowly floated into the distance. It was very, very slow. It was even slower than taking a stroll. However, he was indeed flying on his sword. After a short while, Yi Xian arrived at the bottom of a waterfall on his sword. It took him almost an hour to get there, which was less than 1,000 feet away. Moreover, his sword was very close to the ground. It was less than the height of an adult. Under the waterfall, Bai Zhe, who was cultivating, suddenly raised his head and looked at Yi Xian, who was not far away. He said in shock, "Bandit Yi. You." Yi Xian placed his hands behind his back. He glanced at Bai Zhe, who was under the waterfall, with a disdainful look in his eyes. "Please call me Sword Immortal Yi in the future. Thank you." Chapter 85. Yi Xian turned around and left on his sword. However, his speed was too slow. Too slow, too slow. It was like a tortoise was crawling. Behind Yi Xian, Bai Zhe was dumbfounded. Sword kinesis flight? Yi Xian was indeed sword kinesis flight. But something was amiss. Soon Yi Xian arrived in front of a dense forest on his sword. At this moment, a person who was running not far away stopped. This person was Mo Yunqi, who was cultivating crazily. Mo Yunqi looked at Yi Xian, who was flying on his sword in the distance, with a face full of shock. "Bandit Yi, what are you doing?" Yi Xian placed his hands behind his back and glanced at Mo Yunqi. "Please teach me Sword Immortal Yi. Thank you." With that said, he flew off into the distance on his sword. Mo Yunqi was dumbfounded and only regained his senses after a while. This guy. After some time, Yi Xian arrived at Old Man Ji's courtyard on his sword. Unfortunately, he couldn't fly over the wall because the distance between the sword and the ground was too close. Thus, Yi Xian entered through the door on his sword. Old Man Ji was lying on the reclining chair. As usual, his entire body emitted an unpleasant smell of alcohol. At this moment, Old Man Ji suddenly opened his eyes and looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian quickly straightened his body. He placed his hands behind his back and looked at Old Man Ji. "Old Man Ji, please teach me Sword Immortal Yi." Pfft. Old Man Ji suddenly spat out a mouthful of alcohol. He glanced at Yi Xian and tapped with his finger. A gold coin landed in front of Yi Xian. Hurry up and find a doctor. Don't delay. Yi Xian was speechless. 2 hours later, Yi Xian sat in front of the stone steps of Kanglan Palace. In front of him, the elegant spirit sword floated quietly. Looking at the spirit elegant sword before him, Yi Xian was a little worried. He could indeed fly on his sword now, but he couldn't increase his speed no matter how hard he tried. Not only that, but he also found it extremely strenuous to fly on his sword. Something must have gone wrong. But the question was, what was the problem? No matter how he thought about it, he could not understand. A moment later, Yi Xian stopped thinking about this problem and started cultivating the sword control technique. Under his control, the spirit elegant sword kept flying above his head at a very fast speed. It was at least twice as fast as before. Not only that, but he could control it even more smoothly now. When facing an enemy, the power of his imperial sword technique was not small. It should be said that it had a miraculous effect. Unfortunately, he always felt that there was something lacking, but he didn't know what it was. He asked Old Ji, but Old Ji didn't understand at all. In other words, Old Ji didn't want to teach him anything about the sword Dao. This made Yi Xian a little depressed. The mysterious woman had not woken up yet, so he had no one to ask. He could only figure it out himself. In a dense forest at the back of the mountain, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground while a sword flew across the field continuously. Every time the exquisite sword flew across, a large tree in the field would be cut in half at the waist. From time to time, Mo Yunqi would come to the forest to fight with him. However, every time Mo Yunqi was about to lose, he would immediately flee. Just like that, day after day passed. On a certain morning, in Old Ji's courtyard, an old man suddenly appeared. The person who came was the dean of Karaki College, Li Xuanzang. Old Ji lay on the reclining chair, still drunk, and didn't look like he was about to wake up. Li Xuanzang glanced at Old Ji and said with a smile, "Old Ji, your days are really comfortable." Old Ji said indifferently, "Spit it out." Li Xuanzang wasn't angry. He glanced at the back mountain and said with a smile, "An unknown mystic realm was discovered in the Jade Mountain range of the Ning Kingdom's capital. The owner of that mystic realm should have been left behind by the former #1 expert of the Ning Kingdom, Tuoba Fu. Back then, Tuoba Fu had already broken through to the Dharma realm. There must be many good things in this mystic realm. This time, the Ning Kingdom is open to the surrounding countries. As long as one is 20 years old or below, they can participate. How about it? Will the Azure Water Academy participate?" "No." Old Ji answered decisively. Li Xuanzang said with a smile, "Not participating? You guys will definitely participate." At this moment, Old Ji suddenly opened his eyes. In the next moment he was about to disappear on the spot. At this moment, Li Xuanzang, who was in front of him, suddenly slammed his palm in front of him. Boom. In an instant the entire small courtyard shattered. In the back mountain, the expressions of Yi Xian and the others changed drastically as they rushed toward the Azure Water Palace. Above a ruin, Li Xuanzang and Old Ji faced each other from afar. Behind Li Xuanzang was a black-robed man. In the black-robed man's hand was a little girl. This little girl was Yi Ling. Li Xuanzang looked coldly at Old Ji and said with a smile, "Tell Yi Xian that if he doesn't participate, then let his sister die in the mystic realm." With that said, he turned to leave with the black-robed man. At this moment, an angry roar suddenly sounded from below. "Old dog, put my sister down." As the voice fell, a sword beam soared into the sky and slashed at Li Xuanzang. In the air, Li Xuanzang's lips curled into a mocking smile as he pressed down with his right hand. Boom. The sword beam shattered, and at the same time, a sword fell straight down, heading straight for Yi Xian. Old Ji suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. With a gentle pull of his right hand, the force in the sword was instantly dissipated. Immediately following that, he waved his right hand, and the spirit elegant sword landed steadily in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian wanted to make a move, but he was stopped by Old Ji. Old Ji stared at Li Xuanzang in the air. "It seems that in order to kill him, your Azure Water Academy doesn't care about its reputation at all. You actually sent 2 myriad Dharma realms to capture a defenseless little girl." "Reputation?" Li Xuanzang's lips curled into a mocking smile. "If your Azure Water Academy could kill Dingu decisively back then, would it have fallen to this state?" Old Ji clenched his fist slowly. "If you dare to touch her, the old man will definitely kill all the students of your Azure Water Academy." Li Xuanzang sneered. "If you dare to touch her, she will definitely die." With that said, he pointed at Yi Xian. "I believe that he won't let you make a move, right?" Yi Xian stared at Li Xuanzang. Old dog, you are the dean of an academy after all. Why can't you take it out on us? Li Xuanzang shook his head and smiled. Reputation? How much is it worth? The old man only knows that if you don't die, our Azure Water Academy won't just lose our reputation in the future, but our 1,000-year foundation. With that said, he looked coldly at old Ji. Don't worry, I won't hurt her. I will only throw her into the mystic realm. However, if you dare to touch her, she will definitely die. With that, he turned around and disappeared into the horizon with the black-robed man. Yi Xian wanted to give chase, but he was stopped by old Ji. Yi Xian looked at old Ji with bloodshot eyes. Old Ji shook his head. I'm sorry. I didn't expect them to do this. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian suddenly turned around with his sword in hand. I don't blame anyone. I only blame myself for being too weak. Old Ji sighed softly. At this moment, Mo Yunqi, Jianji, and Bai Zhe appeared beside old Ji. Mo Yunqi's face was ashen. Old Ji, this Azure Water Academy is 2F** King Shameless. Old Ji said softly, reputation? The talent and strength that Yi Xian has displayed has already made them fearful. If they don't act out of desperation and wait for him to grow for a period of time, our Azure Water Academy's main courtyard might accept him. At that time, they won't be able to get rid of him. Mo Yunqi said solemnly, can't we inform the main courtyard? Let them come and help? Old Ji shook his head. He's not enough. At least he needs to reach Sword Dao Grandmaster before he's 20. At that time, he might attract the main courtyard's attention. Mo Yunqi took a deep breath. This Azure Water Academy is 2F** King Shameless. At this moment, Jianji suddenly said, he's going down the mountain. He should be going to Ning country. Mo Yunqi suddenly said, I'll go with him. Bai Zhe nodded. Together. With that, the two of them turned around and left. At this moment, old Ji suddenly said, this is a trap for him. That secret realm is a hopeless situation for him. And if you go, it will also be a hopeless situation for you. Mo Yunqi stopped. He thought for a moment and smiled bitterly. I know it's a hopeless situation. That's why I have to go. With that, he quickly disappeared into the distance. Bai Zhe hurriedly followed behind. Old Ji looked at Jianji. Jianji said softly, take care. With that, she turned around and returned to Azure Water Palace. After a while, she went down the mountain with a big bag. In the ruins, old Ji was silent for a moment. He came to a small hall at the back of the mountain. Inside the small hall, there were all kinds of spirit tablets. There were a lot, more than 1,000 of them. Looking at those spirit tablets, old Ji did not feel drunk at all. After an unknown amount of time, he suddenly lay on the ground and took the wine gourd from his waist. It's the dean's incompetence, I couldn't protect you. 15 minutes later, an old man suddenly left Azure Water Mountain and went somewhere unknown. Jiang Country's palace. In a dark hall somewhere, an old man sat on the ground and was playing with a black puppy. At this moment, a middle-aged man appeared at the entrance of the hall. The middle-aged man bowed slightly towards the hall and said something. After a while, the old man in the hall suddenly said, Azure Water Academy is not ordinary despicable. The middle-aged man said solemnly, that youth has gone to the kingdom of Ning. The old man fell silent for a moment before saying, investigate who the black-robed man is. Also, send shadow guards to escort that youth. Forget it, I'll personally escort him. After all, he's someone who once dared to fight for the kingdom of Jiang. With that, the old man vanished from where he stood. In a private room of the Drunken Immortal restaurant. A black-robed man suddenly appeared in the private room and bowed slightly to the old man in front of him. After a while, the old man sneered, what a great Azure Water Academy. They really do know how to court death. Pass down the order. Use all forces to investigate the black-robed man who attacked tonight. Also, send people to escort that youth to the kingdom of Ning. Forget it, the old man will go personally. The black-robed man said solemnly, Tower Lord, are you openly choosing a side? The old man said indifferently, that's right. The old man is choosing a side this time. He's going to fight Azure Water Academy. Icing on the cake will never be as good as delivering charcoal in snowy weather, right? After saying that, he disappeared on the spot. To Boundary Mountain. A man suddenly appeared in front of a thatched hut. The man knelt on one knee. Lord, that little girl was kidnapped by Azure Water Academy. A moment later, the thatched hut exploded. A little girl walked out. The little girl's face was ashen. Azure Water Academy? What rubbish is this? If anything happens to her, This lord will slaughter all the students of Azure Water Academy. P.S. There's no more. I don't know how much I've updated. In any case, I've secretly saved up these few days. Finally, it will be published tomorrow. Publishing means that there will be a fee. And a fee means that many of my friends will leave. Just like what the reader said the other day, if there are pirated copies, why should I read the original? Even so, I still hope that I can see your figures tomorrow. I rely on subscriptions to make a living. Therefore, I sincerely hope that the readers who read this book will support the original by subscribing. It's about 10 cents per chapter, which is about 20 to 30 cents per day. And a small subscription from you is a huge support for me. The reason why I didn't choose to publish the book is because there will be a fee if I publish it. Publishing it now will be free. Without further ado, my friends who are staying to read tomorrow, whether you are a lurker or an active person, I hope that after you finish reading you can leave a message. Even a full stop will do. Let me see who is staying. Or should I say how many people are staying? Chapter 86. At the foot of Mount Azure Billow. Yi Xian suddenly stopped. In front of him were Mo Yunqi, Bei Zhe and Jianji. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "This is my business. You don't have to get involved." Mo Yunqi was a little dissatisfied. "Damn, how can you say that? You're not treating us as brothers." Yi Xian wanted to say something, but Mo Yunqi suddenly said seriously, "Don't think so much. Yi Ling is not only your sister but also our sister." With that, he patted Yi Xian's shoulder lightly. "Let's not talk about those emotional things. Let's go." Yi Xian looked at the three of them and nodded. After a quarter of an hour, the four of them boarded the cloud ship. To Ning country. As soon as Yi Xian and the two of them boarded the cloud ship, an old man suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian and the three of them. The old man bowed slightly to Yi Xian. "Young Master Yi, old man is the steward of the cloud ship. Young Master Yi can call me Steward Li." With that, he looked around and said, "This time there are only 4 of you on the cloud ship. In terms of safety, young Master Yi and the 3 of you don't worry. There are experts guarding the surroundings. In addition, our 9th building master is also hiding in the dark. If Karaki Academy wants to launch a sneak attack, our drunken immortal building will be the first to stop them." Hearing Steward Li's words, Mo Yunqi and the other 2 were shocked. Karaki Academy's overbearing and arrogant attitude could be said to be no worse than Karaki Academy's. But now, this drunken immortal building's attitude towards Yi Xian. It was simply a little flattering. Yi Xian cupped his fists at Steward Li. "I'll remember your help this time." Hearing this, Steward Li's mouth immediately turned into a bright smile. "Young Master Yi, the Tower Master also said that we have already thoroughly investigated the conspiracy of Karaki Academy. Before the 4 of you arrive at Ning Kingdom, we will definitely give young Master Yi a satisfactory explanation." Yi Xian nodded. "Thank you." Manager Li smiled. "The 4 of you should rest early. If there's anything you need, please let us know." With that, he bowed slightly and retreated. At this moment, Mo Yunqi looked at Yi Xian. "Are you the illegitimate son of the drunken immortal restaurant's boss?" Yi Xian shook his head. Illegitimate child? He naturally knew why the drunken immortal and would express such goodwill. All of this was because of the mysterious woman. Yi Xian glanced at the 3 of them. "You guys should rest early." With that, he turned around and left. Jianji glanced at Yi Xian and followed. In the same place, Mo Yunqi glanced at Yi Xian's back and sighed. "This guy? Luckily I didn't join Karaki Academy back then. This Karaki Academy is 2F** King Despicable." Bai Zhe nodded. "Despicable." Mo Yunqi looked at Bai Zhe. "Big guy, this time there's no chance of survival." Bai Zhe glanced at Mo Yunqi. "To die together with you? I'm a little hesitant. F***ck. Inside the private room, the moment Yi Xian entered the private room, he suddenly turned around. Not far from him was Jianji. Jianji walked in front of Yi Xian. "Karaki Academy doesn't dare to hurt her." Yi Xian nodded. "I know. Karaki Academy definitely wouldn't dare to kill Yi Ling. Because once they killed Yi Ling, they would have no one to rely on. Moreover, Old Man Ji would take revenge. Karaki Academy also didn't dare to fight to the death. However, they couldn't just let Yi Xian continue to grow. If they let Yi Xian continue to grow, Karaki Academy's situation would only worsen." Jianji glanced at Yi Xian. "Rest well. We'll bring her back." Yi Xian looked at Jianji and said softly, "This trip will definitely be very dangerous." Jianji looked at Yi Xian. "If it wasn't dangerous, we wouldn't have come." After saying that, she opened the bag she brought and took out 2 white steamed buns and handed them to Yi Xian. Don't starve. Yi Xian. A moment later, Jianji left. Inside the private room, Yi Xian sat on a chair and took out a small wooden figure. This small wooden figure looked exactly like Yi Ling. Yi Xian looked at the small wooden figure in his hand. His expression was calm and his eyes didn't waver at all. Wait. All along he felt that he was very strong. At least among the younger generation, Lanxiu was the only one who could fight him. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't arrogant at all. And this time, the cruel reality made him realize that he was actually so weak that he couldn't even withstand a single blow. Li Xuanzang and the black-robed man had taken Yi Ling away, but what about him? He could only choose to watch. In fact, if not for Old Man Ji, he wouldn't even have the chance to watch. He didn't blame Old Man Ji, nor did he blame anyone. He could only blame himself for being weak. He was too weak. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. If he was weak, he had no right to speak. If he was weak, he could only be bullied by others. If he was weak, he could only endure all kinds of injustice. Yi Xian clenched his fists tightly. Fresh blood seeped out of his palms. And in his body, the spirit-elegant sword trembled slightly. In the end, Yi Xian's entire body actually began to tremble. After an unknown amount of time, his entire body began to emit a faint qi, and at this moment, a white piece of paper floated out from the second floor. On the paper was a sword. Around the sword was a sword intent, and behind the sword intent was a big. Obviously it was asking what sword intent was this, imperial capital. News of Yi Ling being kidnapped by Kuraki Academy spread, but it didn't take long before almost everyone in the imperial capital knew about it. In an instant, the entire imperial capital was in an uproar. Anger. This was the current mood of everyone in the imperial capital. Originally they didn't really like Zhonglan Academy. It should be said that they only liked the strong. And when Zhonglan Academy faced Kuraki Academy, they were undoubtedly the weakest side. Hence, in the beginning, everyone stood on Kuraki Academy's side. In this world, people naturally preferred the strong. But after what happened, especially the matter of Kuraki Academy inviting people from Tang, it could be said that the people in the imperial capital hated them to the extreme. One must know that the state of Jiang and the Tang Empire had fought countless times. How many people from the state of Jiang died under the Tang Empire's cavalry? Especially the ordinary poor people, most of their relatives were killed by the Tang Empire. There were also the soldiers in the imperial capital. How many of their friends were killed by the Tang Empire soldiers? And Kuraki Academy actually invited people from Tang Empire to deal with Yi Xian. One must know that Yi Xian was from the state of Jiang. Therefore, countless people stood on Yi Xian's side without even thinking about it. However, for Kuraki Academy, most people only dared to be angry. And now, in order to kill Yi Xian, Kuraki Academy actually captured Yi Xian's sister, Yi Ling. She was just an ordinary little girl. Regarding Kuraki Academy's actions, it could be said that the entire imperial capital dared to speak up. For a time, the streets and alleys of the imperial capital were talking about Kuraki Academy. And when it came to Kuraki Academy, everyone had a look of contempt. The reputation of Kuraki Academy could be said to be extremely bad. Song Mountain. Kuraki Hall. Who is it? An angry shout suddenly sounded from within the Great Hall. In the Great Hall, Li Xuanzang's face was ashen. Who is controlling the public opinion in the imperial capital? At this time, Li Xiu stood up. It should be the drunken immortal house. Maybe the Jiang country's imperial family also has. Li Xuanzang's eyes suddenly turned cold. They have no reason to stand on the side of Zhonglan Academy. Li Xiu's expression was a little ugly. According to our investigation, when Yi Xian and the others went to the Ning country, the drunken immortal house's 9th floor master personally escorted them. In addition, the previous king of the Jiang country's imperial family also secretly escorted them. Hearing this, everyone's expression in the Great Hall became a little ugly. This was clearly standing on the side of Zhonglan Academy. The state of Jiang had 3 major forces: Kuraki Academy, Drunken Immortal House, and the Jiang country's imperial family. And now, these 2 forces actually stood on the side of Zhonglan Academy. The situation was not right. Everyone looked at Li Xuanzang, and Li Xuanzang slowly closed his eyes. Li Xiu, did you really find out the origin of that Yi Xian? Li Xiu nodded. He came from Qingqing. Bullshit. Li Xuanzang suddenly roared angrily. How could a tiny Qingqing nurture a swordsman? And a great swordsman at that? Before that youth entered Zhonglan Academy, he was already a swordsman. This means that he entered Zhonglan Academy with his skills. And after he returned from Two World City, his strength increased by leaps and bounds, to the point that even Fenju was killed by him. How could this kind of person be an ordinary person? Are you people in charge of intelligence useless? Li Xiu's face was a little pale. The current him could be said to be the most disliked person in Karaki Academy. Back then, if he had been a little more open-minded and accepted Yi Xian into Karaki Academy, then Karaki Academy would definitely have been glorious for countless years. As for Tsanglan Academy, it would be a dead end without any hope at all. And now, Tsanglan Academy had hope, while Karaki Academy's situation was getting worse and worse. All of this was because Karaki Academy had given up on that youth who wholeheartedly wanted to enter Karaki Academy. Back then, Karaki Academy mocked Yi Xian for being a student they didn't want. Now, the entire imperial capital was mocking them, mocking the trash that Karaki Academy didn't want for killing their strongest student. In the hall, Li Xuanzang suddenly said, "Forget it. What happened in the past can't be undone, so there's no need to continue dwelling on it." As he spoke, he swept a glance at everyone in the hall. "Now what we need to do is to unite. No matter who is behind Yi Xian or what his background is, he must die. I believe all of you know how Tsanglan Academy declined back then." Everyone nodded in agreement. At this time, Karaki Academy couldn't afford to have any more problems. Li Xuanzang turned to look at Vice Dean Mo Song nearby. "How are the preparations going?" Mo Song said solemnly, "It's almost done. As for Ning Country, King Tuoba Yen has already agreed to our request and will cooperate with us." Li Xuanzang nodded. "What about the students from the Great Cloud Empire?" Mo Song hesitated for a moment and said, "They're requesting a heaven-rank martial technique. If we agree, then they'll dispatch someone from the academy to rush over." "Agree." Li Xuanzang suddenly said, "If they kill Yi Xian, then not only will they be given a low-grade heaven-rank martial technique, they'll also be given a low-grade heaven-rank cultivation technique. Besides that, they'll be given a light-rank spirit artifact." Everyone in the surroundings was stunned when they heard this. Heaven rank. That was truly priceless. After so many years of inheritance, Karaki Academy had less than 5 heaven-rank martial techniques, and 3 of them were only incomplete. As for light-rank spirit artifacts, Karaki Academy only had 6 of them. And these 6 items had been accumulated by Karaki Academy for nearly 1,000 years. They'd given them away just like that. Everyone felt a slight pain in their hearts. Suddenly, Li Xuanzang glanced coldly at them. If Yi Xian doesn't die, then he'll definitely lead Azure Wave Academy to rise to prominence. At that time, it's very likely that Karaki Academy will suffer the same fate as Azure Wave Academy. We can still fight for it if it's gone, but if the academy is gone and the people are gone, then all of that would be meaningless. Everyone within the hall fell silent. Li Xuanzang gazed at Mo Song. "What about the others?" Mo Song spoke in a low voice. "Besides the academies from the Great Cloud Empire, there are academies from other kingdoms that are very interested in this matter. Quite a few renowned experts have come, and one of them is even a monstrous genius on the martial rankings. Besides that, there are also some independent cultivators. All of them are aware of Yi Xian's strength, so they're confident in their ability to come." When he spoke up to here, he gazed at Mo Song. "I heard that some assassin organizations have sent their members." Li Xuanzang's eyes narrowed slightly. "Has the Dark Dimension sent anyone?" Mo Song shook his head. "I don't know." Li Xuanzang fell silent for a moment, and then he said, "Send someone to tell them that if they kill Yi Xian, then give them a low-grade heaven-rank martial technique as well. No, send the order that anyone who is able to kill Yi Xian will be rewarded with a low-grade heaven-rank martial technique, a low-grade heaven-rank cultivation technique, and a low-grade light-rank spirit artifact." Mo Song gazed at Li Xuanzang and spoke with astonishment. "Such rewards are sufficient to kill 10 experts at the Divine Union realm. Perhaps even some old geezers will come." Everyone here was dumbfounded. Not to mention killing Yi Xian, even killing old man Ji would tempt them. Of course, being tempted was one thing and daring to come was another. Li Xuanzang's expression was ferocious. "Since Azure Wave Academy is protecting him, then I'll make Azure Wave Academy the enemy of the entire world." An hour later, the bounty on Yi Xian's head was announced, and the surrounding kingdoms were seething with excitement. This reward. It was truly too terrifying. At this moment, even some of the powers that were closer to the kingdom of Jiang were tempted. Twin World City within a tent. Jiang Jiao gazed at the secret memorial before her for a very long time. In the end, she stood up slowly. "Notify my imperial father and ask Senior Lin to come here and hold down the fort." As soon as she finished speaking, she swiftly walked out of the tent, and then she leaped onto a horse. An old man behind her hurriedly said, "Your Highness, you're the commander of an army, so how can you leave so easily?" Jiang Jiu took out a gold card, and it was the card that Yi Xian had given her all those years ago. The money within it had been transferred away, but she'd kept it all this time. Jiang Jiu grinned as she gazed at the gold card in her hand. How could I betray my lord when he treated me so well? Chapter 87. In the private room on the cloud ship, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. His body was emitting a strange intent. The reason why it was strange was that this intent was faintly discernible, appearing and disappearing from time to time. At the entrance of the second level, another piece of paper floated in front of Yi Xian. There was still a sword on it, and behind the sword was a big. A moment later, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes. He looked at the paper in front of him and said softly, "I don't know either." With that, he stood up and the spirit elegant sword suddenly flew out from his body. In the next moment, the entire first level of the prison pagoda was filled with sword light. Around the spirit elegant sword, besides the faint sword light, there was also a faintly discernible intent. At the same time, the compatibility between the sword and him had reached 99%. Now he no longer needed to use chi to control the sword. Instead, he could use intent to control the sword. The speed of the sword was at least 5 times faster than before. This was true sword control. The cloud ship was getting closer and closer to the country of Ning. The country of Ning. The country of Ning, the country of Jiang, and the country of Tang were very close. It could be said that the 3 countries were in a triangle. However, the country of Ning had an advantage over the country of Jiang and the country of Tang. It could be said that the country of Ning was the strongest among the 3 countries. The main reason was that the country of Tang and the country of Jiang were mortal enemies. The 2 countries had never stopped fighting, and when there was fighting, there would be internal friction. As for the country of Ning, it had always been focused on development. Apart from that, the country of Ning also had a natural geographical advantage. It was surrounded by rich minerals and had no natural enemies. Therefore, the country of Ning could be said to be the strongest among the surrounding countries. As for the country of Ning, it had always maintained a neutral position and never participated in any country's fights. It was also for this reason that the country of Jiang, the country of Tang, and the surrounding countries all wanted to befriend them. Early morning. A cloud ship slowly approached the imperial capital of the country of Ning. Just as it was 100 feet away from the imperial capital of the country of Ning, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared in front of the cloud ship. The middle-aged man looked coldly at the cloud ship. "Do you have a pass?" "Pass?" On the deck of the cloud ship, Yi Xian looked at Jianji. Jianji said softly, "Any cloud ship without a pass is not allowed to enter the Ning nation without permission. Not even the drunken immortal inn." She paused slightly as she spoke, and then she said, "No matter if it's Immortal Indulgence Inn or Karaki Academy, their influence is very low in the Kingdom of Ning because the imperial family of the Kingdom of Ning is very strong." Back then, these 2 forces were almost completely eradicated by Tuoba Fu, the former #1 expert of Ning country. Although these 2 forces were not completely eradicated in the end, whatever these 2 forces do in Ning country, they have to listen to the royal family of Ning country. Jianji's words surprised everyone. One had to know that the Drunken Immortal Restaurant and Karaki Academy were extremely overbearing and arrogant in the country of Jiang. At this moment, Manager Li suddenly appeared before the middle-aged man in the distance. With a tap of his finger, a card fell in front of the middle-aged man, and in next to no time the middle-aged man turned around and vanished. The cloud ship continued forward, and it wasn't long before it descended slowly and steadily within the imperial capital of the Kingdom of Ning. On the deck of the cloud ship, Manager Li walked over to Yi Xian's group of 4, and then he bowed slightly and said, "Young Master Yi, we found out about the scheme of the Drunken Immortal Inn. They've issued a huge bounty to the surrounding kingdoms, and the rewards they've offered are extremely high. So, there might be many people participating in the secret realm this time, and none of them are weak. Moreover, their objective is absolutely not to investigate the secret realm but to surround and kill you." Yi Xian nodded, "I understand. Thank you for telling me." Manager Li glanced at Yi Xian. When he saw how composed Yi Xian was, he hesitated for a moment and said, "Young Master Yi, all of them aren't ordinary people, and there are even people on the martial rankings." Yi Xian cupped his fists. "I, Yi Xian, will remember your help today. Goodbye." After saying that, he, Jianji, and the other two turned around and walked off the cloud ship. Not long later they disappeared at the end of the street. On the cloud ship, Manager Li turned around, and not far from him stood an old man. It was the 9th floor master of the Drunken Immortal Inn. Manager Li said solemnly, "Floor master, this time Karaki College can be said to be spending a lot of money to get rid of this young Master Yi, and we've openly sided with him. This is really a bit risky." The 9th floor master said indifferently, "Risky? If we don't help him now, we won't have a chance to remove the estrangement between our Drunken Immortal Inn and him in the future." As he said that, he turned around and looked into the distant horizon. Behind this young man stood a sword immortal. A sword immortal. In the entire Qingzhou there had never been a sword immortal. Even the firmament sword master didn't reach the level of a sword immortal. A sword immortal, not to mention a Karaki College branch, even Karaki College's main college had to bow down to him. And now, Karaki College wanted to take revenge on this Yi Xian. Thinking of this, the 9th floor master suddenly shook his head and smiled. "Karaki College? Why are you all so outstanding?" Ning Country's Imperial Palace. A woman sat on the dragon throne. She wore a golden dragon robe. The dragon robe was not bulky, on the contrary, it was very fitting, accentuating the woman's curvaceous figure. The woman's long hair was casually scattered behind her head. She looked at the memorial in front of her with a calm expression, and there was a sense of majesty between her brows. The woman in front of her was the king of Ning Country, Tuoba Yen. A moment later, Tuoba Yen closed the memorial. "The person I want you to find is this Yi Xian?" In a dark corner a voice sounded, "Your Majesty, it is. We have investigated this person's background. He is from Azure City of Jiang Country. His parents are unknown, and he and his younger sister depend on each other. Before the age of 12, he brought his younger sister to live a difficult life in the Yi family. Later, he was valued by the Yi family patriarch and was conferred as the Yi family's young master. Soon, the voice clearly recounted everything that had happened to Yi Xian from Azure City to the imperial capital. Of course there were some exceptions. A moment later, Tuoba Yen leaned back on the dragon throne and slowly closed her eyes. "You only investigated the surface." In the dark corner, the voice said, "According to our analysis, there should be another expert behind this person other than Azure Billow College. However, we can't find out who exactly it is. However, this person killed a steward of the Drunken Immortal Inn on the cloud ship of the Drunken Immortal Inn, but he came out unscathed. Not only that, but the Drunken Immortal Inn is also constantly trying to rope him in. Therefore, according to our analysis, the person behind him should not be simple." Not simple. Tuoba Yen suddenly opened her eyes. Her gaze was as sharp as a knife, extremely cold. At this moment, she recalled that day in the dense forest, when she was nailed to a tree by 2 rays of sword light. In the face of those 2 rays of sword light, she actually couldn't fight back at all. At this moment, the voice spoke again, "This is the person that Karaki Academy wants our Ning Country to cooperate with and kill. Your Majesty, everyone in the Wisdom Strategy Pavilion requests Your Majesty to reject the deal with Karaki Academy." Tuoba Yen said indifferently, "Why?" In the corner the voice sounded again, "This person came from Azure City to the Imperial Capital, then from the Imperial Capital to Two World City, and then from Two World City to the Imperial Capital. During this period, his strength can be described as advancing by leaps and bounds." Coupled with the attitude of the Jiang country's imperial family and the Drunken Immortal and towards him, we speculate that there is either an extremely powerful expert or an extremely powerful super force behind this person. Our Jiang country should not make enemies so easily. Tuoba Yen looked indifferently at the portrait of Yi Xian in front of her and did not speak. At this moment, a black-clothed man suddenly appeared in the hall and knelt on one knee. "Your Majesty, there are 76 people who have come to besiege Yi Xian. These 76 people are all peerless geniuses from various countries. Among them there are 3 on the martial roll. Great Cloud Empire's Kuraki Academy has also sent someone. As for who it is, we have not found out yet. In addition, the Dark World has also sent someone. As for who it is, we have not found out yet. The Dark World." Tuoba Yen frowned slightly. "This assassin organization is also here to join in the fun?" The black-clothed man said in a deep voice, "The reward offered by Kuraki Academy this time is too great. No one is not tempted." Tuoba Yen nodded slightly. "You may leave." The black-clothed man turned and left. The hall fell silent. After a while, Tuoba Yen suddenly said, "After the secret realm opens, our Ning country will not participate in this matter. Inform all the clans and imperial family members of our Ning country not to participate in the encirclement of Yixian. Those who disobey will be executed. Understood. The Ning country's imperial capital. As soon as Yixian's group of 4 entered the streets, they were surrounded by a group of people. There were more than a dozen people in front of Yixian's group. All of them wore the same uniform and there was a symbol on the left side of their chests. The symbol of Kuraki Academy. Countless people surrounded them from both sides of the street. Obviously they wanted to watch the show. Across from Yixian, a Kuraki student sneered, "I guess you must be Yixian from the Zhanglan Academy in Jiang country. I heard that your head is worth a lot of money." Right at this moment, Yixian suddenly disappeared on the spot. In the next moment, the man who had just spoken stopped abruptly. At the same time, his throat suddenly split open and blood splattered. Everyone's expressions changed drastically. Yixian did not stop. He opened his palm, and the spirit elegant sword suddenly flew out. A strand of light flashed through the group of students of Kuraki Academy like a butterfly. Ah! Shrill cries resounded incessantly. At the same time, the heads of the Kuraki Academy students rolled to the ground. Not a single one of them survived. Everyone present was dumbfounded. Jianji and the others were stunned as well. They exchanged glances, and there was a trace of seriousness in their eyes. At this moment, the evil aura emanating from Yixian's body was too heavy. It was as if he had become a completely different person. At this moment, the spirit elegant sword descended firmly in front of Yixian, and a drop of blood slowly dripped down from the tip of the spirit elegant sword. Yixian sheathed his sword and walked slowly towards the distance. After taking 2 steps, he suddenly stopped because a middle-aged man was standing not too far away from him. The middle-aged man stared fixedly at Yixian. This is the Ning country, not the Jiang country. It's not a place where you can behave atrociously. Right at this moment, Yixian suddenly vanished on the spot. In the next moment he appeared above the middle-aged man. At the same time his sword slashed down. The sword was extremely swift, and the middle-aged man's body was split into 2 before he could even react. Fresh blood sprayed all over the ground. The sword was sheathed. Yixian wiped off the blood on his face and said softly, "I only came to take my younger sister home." As he spoke, he glanced at the surroundings with a blank expression. "Where's my younger sister?" Everyone in the surroundings had extremely fearful expressions, and their eyes were filled with astonishment. Right at this moment, Yixian's expression suddenly became ferocious. In the next moment, the spirit elegant sword in his hand trembled violently, and a ray of light flashed. Bang! In the distance, a house collapsed with a bang. This fellow has gone mad. Run. Chapter 88. Everyone could see that Yixian was not in his right mind at this moment. The surrounding people did not stand around and watch as they fled frantically in all directions. Jianji, Mo Yunqi and the other 2 hurried over to Yixian. Seeing that Yixian was about to continue attacking, Mo Yunqi hugged his arm. "Big brother, calm down, calm down." Yixian was stunned. After a while he turned to look at Mo Yunqi. "What are you doing?" Mo Yunqi looked confused. You don't remember what happened just now?" Yixian frowned. "What happened?" Mo Yunqi. At this moment, Bai Zhe pointed at the corpses on the ground not far away. Yixian looked at the corpses around him and then looked at Mo Yunqi. "You did this?" Mo Yunqi jumped up. "Damn, did you really lose your memory or did you pretend to lose it?" Yixian frowned even deeper. "I did this?" Mo Yunqi and the other 2. At this moment, Yixian shook his head. "Let's go to the secret realm." After saying that, he walked away slowly with his sword in hand. Mo Yunqi said in a low voice, "This guy doesn't look like he's pretending." Bai Zhe and Jianji nodded. Mo Yunqi sighed. "Their relationship as siblings. If anything happens to that girl, I really don't know what will happen to him. Sai, let's go." The 3 hurriedly followed. The current Yixian was really not normal. The news that more than 10 Kuraki College students were killed by Yixian quickly spread to Ning country's Kuraki College. Soon, more than 10 Kuraki College students rushed out of the college and went straight for Yixian. At a crossroad, Yixian and the other 3 suddenly stopped. In front of them was the group of Kuraki College students who were rushing over. Not far away, among the group of Kuraki College students, a man who was the leader pointed at Yixian angrily. "This is Ning country, not your Jiang country. You..." Right at this moment, Yixian suddenly disappeared on the spot. The man's expression changed drastically when he witnessed this scene, and he was about to retreat. However, a ray of light suddenly slashed towards him like a bolt of lightning. It was too fast. Before the man could react, his head was sent flying. However, Yi Xian didn't stop there. Under the command of his will, the Lingxiu sword flew out once again. In an instant, one of the Kuraki students was sliced in half at the waist. The expressions of the group of students from Kuraki Academy turned grim when they witnessed this scene, and they retreated explosively in succession. On the other hand, Yi Xian didn't stop, and he chased after them madly. Impudent! Right at this moment, an angry shout suddenly sounded out in the sky, and then an invisible pressure enveloped Yi Xian. An expert of the Nether Passage realm. Yi Xian suddenly looked up. Above his head stood an old man. The old man glared at him with undisguised killing intent. The old man was just about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly stomped his right foot, his entire person soaring into the sky. A single strike to decide life and death. In midair, the old man's expression changed drastically, and he suddenly overlapped his hands before pressing them down. Bang! A shapeless wave shook down from the sky, but the ray of light from the sword below easily tore it apart. In the next moment, a head dripping with blood fell from the sky. Everyone in the surroundings was dumbstruck. Especially the group of Kuraki Academy students nearby, they were completely petrified. That old man was an elder of Kuraki Academy's outer court. He was a genuine expert of the Nether Passage realm. However, he'd been instantly killed with a single strike? Mo Yunqi and the others were slightly shocked as well. They knew that Yi Xian was very strong, and they knew that he definitely had the strength to defeat an expert of the Nether Passage realm. However, they'd never imagined that Yi Xian would actually be able to instantly kill an expert of the Nether Passage realm. An instant kill. In midair, Yi Xian sheathed his sword and slowly landed on the ground. He raised his head to look at the group of Kuraki Academy students nearby. Their expressions changed drastically, and they turned to flee. Yi Xian originally wanted to chase after them, but at this time, Mo Yunqi suddenly appeared beside him. Mo Yunqi tightly held onto Yi Xian's arm. Big brother, don't chase after them. Let's go find my sister. Let's find my sister first. He could see it now. Yi Xian was really abnormal. It should be said that there was something wrong with his mind. This guy now wanted to kill anyone he saw, and the more he killed, the more excited he became. They had to find Yi Ling as soon as possible. Otherwise, who knew what this guy would do? After Mo Yunqi pulled Yi Xian away for a while, Yi Xian suddenly looked at him. Mo Yunqi, why are you grabbing onto me? Mo Yunqi. An hour later, the four of them arrived at the Jade Mountain Range. The Jade Mountain Range was boundless and they couldn't see the end. After Yi Xian and the three of them entered the vast mountain range, Bai Zhe suddenly frowned. Something's wrong. The four of them stopped. Bai Zhe lay on the ground and he gently sniffed the ground. After a while, he turned to look at Yi Xian and the other two. There's the smell of humans and there's more than one. More than one. Mo Yunqi was about to speak, but Yi Xian suddenly walked into the distance. Don't be afraid. I'll be in charge of killing and you guys will be in charge of burying. After saying that, he suddenly sped up. Seeing this scene, Mo Yunqi and the other two's expressions changed drastically. Mo Yunqi hurriedly rushed out. Bandit Yi, calm down. Yi Xian's speed was extremely fast, and behind him Mo Yunqi and the other two were following closely. After an unknown period of time, Yi Xian suddenly stopped. Just as he stopped, Mo Yunqi appeared beside him. Mo Yunqi was about to speak, but Yi Xian pointed to the ground not far away. Mo Yunqi looked at the ground, and the ground was filled with leaves and there was nothing else. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly kicked with his right leg, and a stone flew into the ground not far away. Boom! The entire ground suddenly collapsed, and at the same time, countless sharp arrows suddenly shot up from the ground. In an instant there were hundreds of arrows, and at the tip of each arrow there was a green liquid which was obviously extremely poisonous. Seeing this scene, Mo Yunqi's expression changed instantly. If he had gone over just now, he would definitely have been shot into a hedgehog. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly tiptoed, and his entire body floated to the right. Behind a few trees on the right, Yi Xian saw three men. When the three of them saw Yi Xian, their expressions changed instantly. The three of them looked at each other, and just as they were about to attack, the sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly disappeared, and in the next moment, swish swish swish, the heads of the three men instantly flew off. Yi Xian tiptoed and his entire body floated out. His speed became faster and faster, and in a short while he arrived before a large tree. He glanced at the middle of the tree and there was a small footprint there. There was a moment of silence. Buzz. A sword shot into the sky, but very quickly the spirit elegant sword returned to his hand. But under his feet, there was an additional bloody head. Yi Xian stomped hard on the head and it was smashed into pieces. Amazing! At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from not far away. Yi Xian looked up, and there was a long-haired man standing over 30 meters away from him. The man looked slightly ugly, especially his mouth, which was missing a corner. His eyes were also as small as a mouse's, and he looked extremely wretched and ugly. The man grinned, as expected of someone worth such a high price. You really do have some skills. But this is only the beginning. I heard that your sister has been placed in the mystic realm. We'll wait for you there. If you're late, hee. With that, he turned around and his figure trembled and he disappeared not far away. At the same time, Yi Xian disappeared on the spot as well. However, his speed was obviously slower than the long-haired man, and the distance between him and the long-haired man was increasing. In the distance, the long-haired man suddenly turned around and glanced at Yi Xian. You better hurry up. Otherwise your sister will be in a terrible state. Ha! At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared before the long-haired man. This person was Mo Yunqi. Mo Yunqi looked coldly at the long-haired man. You think you're fast? As soon as he finished speaking, Mo Yunqi suddenly vanished on the spot. At the same time, an afterimage suddenly appeared here. The long-haired man's expression changed drastically when he witnessed this scene. He floated backwards while waving his right hand, and then numerous rays of silver light shot out from his palm. Mo Yunqi's figure flashed and avoided these hidden weapons. Right when he was about to attack, the long-haired man's shrill cry resounded from afar. Mo Yunqi raised his head and looked over. The long-haired man was lying on the ground nearby, and his legs had been chopped off at the base by Yi Xian. Yi Xian had no intention to kill the long-haired man. He suddenly stabbed his sword into the long-haired man's collarbone, and then he just dragged the long-haired man towards the distance. The ground was covered in blood. The long-haired man spoke ferociously, "Bastard! Give me a swift death. Give me a swift death." Yi Xian paid no attention to the long-haired man, and he just dragged the long-haired man towards the distance. Meanwhile, Bai Zhe and Jianji had arrived. Mo Yunqi sighed softly. Why do these people keep offending this crazy sister protector? Crazy sister protector. After interacting with Yi Xian, they realized that Yi Xian was usually very amusing and harmless. However, he had a sore spot and that was his sister. Whoever dared to touch his sister would instantly change into another person. He was a real crazy sister protector. Mo Yunqi sighed again. Let's go. Among the people who came this time, some will come openly, but there will also be many who play dirty. As he spoke, he looked at Bai Zhe and Jianji. Bai Zhe, your body is strong enough. You will stay by his side and block the arrows for him. Senior Sister Ji, quickly contact Old Man Ji and see if he can find some reinforcements. To be honest, it's just the four of us. I'm really freaking panicking. Especially that bandit Yi, he's not normal from time to time. Jianji nodded. I'm already contacting him. Bai Zhe looked at Mo Yunqi. What about you? What are you doing? Mo Yunqi said softly. My speed is the fastest among the four of us. After entering, I will separate from you guys. I will first look for Xiaoling and strive to find her before those people. Let's go. Now that guy is alone, I'm really worried. After saying that, the three of them hurriedly followed. Yi Xian used his sword to drag the long-haired man out of the dense forest and came to a plain. The long-haired man was still roaring crazily and begging for death. However, Yi Xian did not give him a quick death. All of a sudden Yi Xian stopped. He turned around and looked at the long-haired man who was constantly howling. Looking at the long-haired man, Yi Xian grinned. In the past I was too kind. That's why they dared to bully my sister. In the future I won't do it again. After saying that, he suddenly kicked the long-haired man's head. Bang! The head was instantly flung into the air along with a pillar of blood. At the same place, Yi Xian held his sword and walked into the distance. His eyes were a little dull. Little girl, don't worry, brother will bring you home immediately. As long as it's someone who has hurt you, brother will not let them off, not a single one of them. P.S. Another free chapter because that chapter has 4,000 words. Count it as a benefit from me to everyone. Chapter 89. At the mouth of a canyon, there was a crystal blue door of light. The crystal blue door of light was like a whirlpool and it was quite mysterious. At this moment, A young man holding a long sword slowly walked over from afar. The person that had arrived was precisely Yi Xian. Beside Yi Xian were Mo Yunqi and the other two. Jianji glanced at the door of light in the distance and said softly, "This is the secret realm." Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. "I don't know what's waiting for me inside, but I will definitely go, and you guys, all right. At this moment, Mo Yunqi waved his hand. "You're the one? Gather? Subjugating Quran? Kaboom? Liquid Meng Fuing Cha." Yi Xian looked at Mo Yunqi and the other two. He didn't say anything else but turned and walked towards the light door. Bei Zhe and Jianji followed behind. Soon the three of them entered the door of light. At this time Mo Yunqi took a deep breath. "Xiaolinger, please don't let anything happen to you. I still want to eat your cooking." As soon as he finished speaking, his figure trembled and he directly entered the light door. In the field. Roughly 15 minutes later, countless afterimages suddenly flew over from all directions. Very quickly, all of these afterimages entered the light door. Somewhere in the sky, an old man stared at the door of light below. This person was the dean of Karaki Academy, Li Xuanzong. Beside him was a black-robed man. The black-robed man suddenly said, "This person isn't simple." Li Xuanzong remained expressionless. "It's precisely because he's not simple that he has to die." The black-robed man was silent. Li Xuanzong slowly closed his eyes. "If necessary at all costs." On the other side, at the top of a certain tree, two old men were staring at the light gate not far away. They were none other than the previous ruler of Jiang Country, Jiang Yuetian, and the ninth-floor master of the Drunken Immortal Tavern. Jiang Yuetian suddenly looked at the ninth-floor head and said with a smile, "Ninth-floor head, I'm surprised that the Drunken Immortal House has chosen a side this time." The ninth-floor master said indifferently, "You've surprised me as well. After all, if you lose this bet, your Jiang Country's royal family will have to face the crazy revenge of the Karaki Academy." Jiang Yuetian smiled and said, "I believe the ninth-floor lord is betting a lot this time. How about this, let's work together." The ninth-floor master fell silent. Jiang Yuetian said softly, "There might be some old farts coming this time. We can help him fend off those old monsters. As for the younger ones, he can deal with them himself." After a moment of silence, the ninth-floor master nodded. "All right." Jiang Yuetian turned to look at the door of light in the distance, his expression gradually turning serious. But this time the royal family of Jiang Country was really gambling. He was betting that there was a big shot behind Yi Xian, a super big shot at that. If he won the bet and the Karaki Academy lost, the royal family of Jiang Country would obtain countless benefits. Moreover, they would be able to rope in Yi Xian. One must know that Yi Xian had an excellent relationship with the ninth princess. This time they had publicly chosen a side, and this relationship could become even better. And with Yi Xian's talent, his future would be limitless. The stronger Yi Xian was, the more benefits the royal family of Jiang Country would obtain in the future. But if he lost the bet, the royal family of Jiang Country would directly stand against the Karaki Academy. At that time, the Karaki Academy would definitely take revenge on the Jiang Country, and even join forces with the Tang Country to deal with the Jiang Country. Can't afford to lose. Jiang Yuetian slowly closed his eyes. In fact, he did not want to cut off all means of retreat, but there was no other way because Jiangjiu had already rushed to the Ning Country. Unless the Jiang Country gave up on Jiangjiu, there was no difference between Jiangjiu choosing Yi Xian and the royal family choosing Yi Xian. After a moment, Jiang Yuetian shook his head and sighed. A grown girl can't be kept at home. Somewhere on the ground, a woman in a black dragon robe stood proudly on a boulder. Her hands were behind her back, and her beautiful hair casually fluttered behind her head. She exuded an invisible domineering and majestic aura. This person was Tuoba Yen. Behind Tuoba Yen were an old man and an old woman. Tuoba Yen glanced indifferently at the door of light in the distance. "Do you think that young man came to save his sister despite knowing that this is a dead end? Is he stupid, or is he acting on impulse?" Behind Tuoba Yen the old man said coldly, "Stupid. This person's talent is probably only second to Enlanxio. If he stays alive, it is not impossible for him to overthrow the Karaki Academy in the future." "Shut up." At this moment, the old woman beside the old man suddenly looked coldly at the old man. "I think you're the stupid one." The old man's mouth twitched, but he did not dare to talk back. He just snorted coldly. The old woman looked at the door of light. "Your Majesty, in this old woman's opinion, this person is a true man who values friendship and righteousness." Tuoba Yen said indifferently, I'm afraid he will only be sacrificing himself for nothing. The old woman shook her head. I don't think it's a big deal whether he sacrifices himself or not. The main issue is whether he dares to come. If he doesn't come and watch his sister die, he will be a useless person even if he becomes a sword immortal in the future. The old man frowned slightly. Can't you be more civilized? The old woman glared at the old man, who pursed his lips and did not dare to say anything else. On the stone, Tuoba Yen said indifferently, Aunt Jiang is right. If he doesn't come today, he will not be a man even if he becomes a sword immortal in the future. At this moment, a black-robed man appeared not far behind Tuoba Yen and knelt on one knee. Your Majesty, the Dean of the country of Zhang's Karaki Academy, Li Xuansong, asked us why we violated the contract and did not send people to kill Yi Xian. Tuoba Yen turned to look at the black-robed man. Tell him to scram. The black-robed man was stunned before he turned and left. After an unknown period of time, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes. At that moment he was in a grassland surrounded by mountains. Above him was a blue sky with white clouds. A mystic realm? The so-called mystic realm was actually no different from the outside world. It could be understood as the inside and outside of the house were still in the original world. It was just that this area was separated from the outside world by a mystic technique. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly frowned because he did not notice Jianji and the other two. Were they randomly teleported? Yi Xian's frown deepened. Without thinking too much, Yi Xian walked into the distance at a fast speed. Not only did he have to find his sister Yi Ling, but he also had to meet up with Jianji and the other two. Not long after, a man appeared not far away from him. The man was holding a long black spear. The man sized up Yi Xian and was about to speak when Yi Xian, who was not far away, suddenly disappeared on the spot. In the blink of an eye, Yi Xian arrived before the man with the spear. The man's pupils constricted to the size of a needle. The next moment he leaped and smashed his spear down. Peak airborne realm. More than that, when the spear smashed down, a dreadful flame gushed out of the tip of the spear. The powerful flame instantly shrouded Yi Xian. However, a sword howl resounded, and the flame was instantly torn open. In the next moment, Yi Xian was already a few meters behind the man with the spear. Behind Yi Xian, the man with the spear stared blankly into the distance. I should have made the first move. As soon as he finished speaking, his head tilted to the side and fell from his neck. Blood sprayed out like a fountain. Yi Xian lowered his head to look at his hand. His palm was a bloody mess, and it wasn't just his palm. His entire arm was a bloody mess. In that instant, if he hadn't made the first move, it was very likely that he would have died. Even if he didn't die, it would have been a lose-lose situation. Because the man's attack didn't just contain spear intent, he had executed an Earth-rank martial technique, and it was even a mid-grade Earth-rank martial technique. And because he had made the first move, he had the upper hand, which caused the man with the spear to be killed before the power of the spear could be fully unleashed. If the power of the spear was fully unleashed unless he summoned the armor of Terra, he would definitely die or be crippled. I can't look down on anyone. Yi Xian collected his thoughts, took out a white jade bottle and poured out a pill. Golden Sword pill. One pill was worth hundreds of thousands of gold coins. Although he was a little reluctant to use it, he had to use it. He had to keep himself in a good state at all times. Because this was just the beginning. Yi Xian walked to the man's corpse and picked up the spear. The spear wasn't an ordinary item, it was a top-grade spiritual weapon. Yi Xian kept the spear in the first floor of the prison pagoda, and then took the bag from the man's waist and threw it into the prison pagoda. Then he turned around and walked into the distance. He walked very quickly, very quickly. Not long after, he arrived at a river. The river wasn't very wide, it was only a few meters wide. Yi Xian glanced at the river and then he walked to the bank. Suddenly, he drew his sword and slashed at the river in front of him. This slash came without any warning. At the moment when Yi Xian's sword slashed down, a pillar of water suddenly shot up from the river in front of him. Then, a figure retreated rapidly from the water pillar. Soon, the figure retreated to the bank opposite Yi Xian. It was a man in a black robe. The man's hands were hidden in his sleeves, and he stared fixedly at Yi Xian. How did you know I was in the water? Yi Xian glanced at the man in the black robe. Why don't you take a guess? He used to be good at killing people in the mountain range, so he knew very well where to set up an ambush and where to launch a sneak attack. After he entered the secret realm, he knew that he was the prey, and those who came to kill him would definitely know where he was. At such a time, he naturally had to be extremely careful. Because the slightest carelessness could lead to his death. The facts proved that he was right to be careful. The man in the black robe opposite Yi Xian was about to speak when the sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly slashed out. In the distance, the man's expression changed drastically, and he suddenly pressed his hands together. Two golden claws directly clasped onto Yi Xian's spirit gray sword. However, the golden claws split apart because the spirit gray sword was a mid-grade light-rank weapon, whereas the claws were merely supreme-grade spirit weapons. Right at this moment, the spirit gray sword trembled violently, and the claws in the man's hands shattered with a bang. The man's expression changed drastically, and he retreated explosively. The spirit gray sword didn't pursue the man. Instead, it slashed backwards and directly slashed into the river in front of Yi Xian. Bang! The river exploded with a bang. In the next moment, a shrill cry resounded from below the river, and it wasn't long before the river in front of Yi Xian was dyed red. In the distance, the man in the black robe looked at Yi Xian in disbelief. How could you possibly know? Yi Xian glanced at the man in the black robe indifferently. You're so weak. If you didn't have any helpers, how would you dare to look for me? Monster. The man in the black robe stared fixedly at Yi Xian, and his eyes were filled with extreme shock. Not only was the man in front of him extremely powerful, his intelligence was also heaven-defying. The man in the black robe said in a low voice, I withdraw. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared before the man in the black robe with his sword, and he slashed out with his sword. Hiss. The man's head flew into the air instantly. Yi Xian used his fingers to gently wipe away the fresh blood on the spirit gray sword. I'm sorry, I don't agree. At this moment, the sound of footsteps suddenly sounded out from behind Yi Xian. As the footsteps sounded, the river in front of Yi Xian suddenly boiled violently. Not only that, but the ground beneath Yi Xian's feet also began to tremble. Intent. A powerful intent enveloped Yi Xian's surroundings. Yi Xian opened his palm, and the spirit gray sword landed steadily in his palm. Looking at the spirit gray sword in his hand, Yi Xian said softly, no matter who the person behind us is, let's kill him with one slash, alright? There was a moment of silence. Buzz. A sword's hum suddenly resounded through the sky. Chapter 90. The sword understood the will of man. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly when he saw the spirit sword resonate with him, and it was a slightly savage smile. Yi Xian turned around and saw a man standing not too far away from him. The man wore a snow-white robe that dragged on the ground, and there were 4 plum blossoms embroidered on it. The man gazed at Yi Xian and didn't speak. Yi Xian gazed at the man and didn't speak as well. Both of them stood in confrontation just like that. On many occasions, the first to attack would allow one to seize the initiative, but it was also possible for one to expose one's weakness first. Obviously, neither of them wanted to attack first at this moment. However, this sort of stalemate didn't last for long because Yi Xian moved. A swordsman. What was the most important thing for a swordsman when facing an enemy? It was naturally confidence. Moreover, what he needed the most when deciding life and death with a single strike of his sword was confidence. It's fine if I don't attack, but once I do, I'll decide your life and death. At the moment Yi Xian moved, a strand of overbearing sword aura enveloped the man. When he sensed the sword aura emanated from Yi Xian, the man's pupils instantly constricted. What a formidable sword aura. What a formidable sword technique. The long-robed man slowly closed his eyes. Bang. A terrifying imposing aura swept out from within him, and it forcefully obstructed Yi Xian's sword aura. The imposing aura of the Nether Passage realm and an unknown concept. The two of them combined into one to forcefully obstruct Yi Xian's sword aura. At the same time, the man suddenly spread his palms open. Mountain water howl. Bang. The river behind Yi Xian suddenly trembled violently, and then countless water arrows flew up from within the river and shot explosively towards Yi Xian. On the other hand, the ground beneath the man's feet suddenly split open, and then countless rocks shot into the sky and instantly drowned Yi Xian beneath them. Right at this moment, a sword howl resounded. Along with this sword howl, a strand of light suddenly flashed into appearance amidst the rocks. The sound of something tearing resounded. In the next moment, Yi Xian appeared several feet behind the long-robed man. In the air, the countless water arrows dissipated with a loud bang, and the gravel also fell to the ground in an instant. Everything returned to normal. Behind Yi Xian, between the eyebrows of the long-robed man, a drop of blood slowly dripped down. He stared blankly into the distance. Sword will, you are not the great swordsman. As his voice faded, there was no longer any color in his eyes. Yi Xian opened his palm and the spirit elegant sword suddenly flew in front of the man in long robe. In the blink of an eye, it returned to Yi Xian's palm and on the tip of the sword hung a money pouch. Yi Xian threw the bag of money into the world prison pagoda and continued forward. Not long after Yi Xian left, a man and a woman appeared in the field. The man was tall and carried a large saber on his back. There was a very obvious scar on his face. The woman was petite and had several whips on the back of her head. She had 2 short sabers hanging from her waist. The woman glanced at the long-robed man's corpse in the distance. Snow Plum Blossom. This person should be Chu's young master Snow Plum. This person reached the Nether Passage realm at the age of 20 and comprehended the concept of mountains and rivers. He is known as the most promising person in the younger generation of Chu. I never thought that he would be killed by this Yi Xian in one strike here. As she said this, she looked at the knife-scarred man. Brother, although Yi Xian is not on the martial roll, his strength is definitely enough to enter the martial roll. We should give up. The man slowly closed his eyes. If we can kill this person, not only will we be able to become famous, we will also be able to obtain the rewards of Karaki Academy. With those rewards, us brother and sister will no longer need to wander around in the future, and we will be able to rebuild our family. We can't give up on this opportunity. The woman frowned. Brother, that Yi Xian is not someone we can fight against. The man laughed coldly. Since the 2 of us can't fight against him, then call a few more people. Let's go. As he said this, he turned and left into the distance. The petite woman glanced at the corpse on the ground and sighed softly. However, she still hurriedly followed. Yi Xian crossed the river and sprinted forward. He was very fast, or rather, very anxious. He had yet to find Yi Ling, so he was naturally anxious. At that moment, his body was filled with a ruthless aura. Right now, he only wanted to find Yi Ling as soon as possible. After crossing the river, Yi Xian came to a swamp. The swamp was very big and it would take a lot of time to go around it. Yi Xian did not choose to go around it because what he needed now was time. However, he did not enter it rashly. Instead, he stood at the edge and looked into the distance. There were many scattered trees around the swamp, and these trees grew in the swamp. Apart from that, there were also some bushes. After a moment of silence, the spirit elegant sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly flew out, and the sword sank into a bush not far to his right. Boom! The thicket exploded with a loud bang, and a figure rapidly retreated from within. The spirit elegant sword did not stop, and it chased after the figure. The sword was very fast, like a bolt of lightning. The person was shocked and he retreated rapidly. However, at that moment he forgot that he was in a swamp. After taking a few steps back, his legs sank into the swamp. After sinking into the swamp, the person hurriedly said, "Sir, I'll back out, Chi." The head of the man who spoke flew off. In a short while, the man's body was instantly swallowed by the swamp. The spirit elegant sword flew back to Yi Xian. Yi Xian skimmed into the distance, and every time he moved forward, the spirit elegant sword would fly out. Wherever he thought it was dangerous, the spirit elegant sword would go there to investigate. Just like that, when Yi Xian arrived at the center of the swamp, there were already a few corpses behind him. These people were actually not weak, but it was a pity that they wanted to launch a sneak attack, and they had underestimated the terrifying extent of Yi Xian's flying sword. If they had fought head-on, it would have been impossible for Yi Xian to kill them so easily. Unfortunately, these people wanted to launch a sneak attack, and they had underestimated Yi Xian's vigilance, so they were caught off guard. All of a sudden Yi Xian stopped. Danger. Yi Xian frowned. He had been fighting with people in the mountains all year round, and it had become an instinct. After Yi Xian stopped, he glanced at his surroundings. He was currently on a single piece of wood, and the closest piece of wood to him was at least 50 feet away. Especially the piece of wood in front of him, which was more than 100 feet away from him. If he flew over and someone suddenly attacked him while he was flying. During this period of time, although he could fly, he would not be able to use his chi, nor would he be able to borrow strength. His strength would be greatly reduced in an instant. Most importantly, what if that single piece of wood disappeared? If he flew, he would definitely die. Retreat? He couldn't retreat now because the person who set the trap would absolutely be able to guess all his escape routes. So, no matter which direction he flew in, the person would definitely react to it. On the piece of wood, Yi Xian fell silent for a moment, and then he suddenly leaped up. When he was about to descend onto the piece of wood in front of him, the piece of wood suddenly exploded into pieces. At the same time, an afterimage flashed over from nowhere. This afterimage was extremely swift, and it arrived above Yi Xian in the blink of an eye. Subsequently, he suddenly slapped his palm down towards Yi Xian. Lightning actually flickered on his palm. Below him, Yi Xian's entire body descended towards the swamp, but his expression was extremely calm. Right when he was about to fall into the swamp, the spirit beauty sword in his hand suddenly transformed into a ray of light that stopped beneath his feet. He stood on the sword. As he stood on the sword, Yi Xian suddenly clenched his right hand into a fist, and then he smashed it upwards. "I'll smash your head apart with a single punch." This punch didn't just contain fist force, it also contained battle intent. A sharp sound of air exploding instantly resounded in the surroundings. Bang. Along with the sound of an explosion, the person above Yi Xian was blasted flying while Yi Xian sank into the swamp along with his sword. But in next to no time, the spirit beauty sword slowly lifted him up from the swamp. Yi Xian didn't attack again, and he just slowly floated towards the left while a man floated in midair over 100 m away from him. The man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Flying on a sword? That's utterly impossible. Yi Xian glanced at the man, and then the sword beneath his feet suddenly transformed into a ray of light that slashed towards the man. The ray of light was extremely swift like a bolt of lightning. The man's expression changed drastically, and he hurriedly dodged to the right. Meanwhile, the spirit beauty sword actually turned and slashed towards him. The man's eyes narrowed slightly when he witnessed this scene. His right palm instantly flickered with lightning, and then he suddenly slapped it forward. Bang! His palm slapped directly onto the spirit beauty sword. In an instant, countless bolts of lightning and rays of light erupted in midair. Right at this moment, the man's expression suddenly changed drastically because Yi Xian had appeared behind him. The man suddenly turned around and slapped his palm forward. At this moment, the lightning in his palm surged out like a torrent. Yi Xian's fist arrived. It was a very simple punch. But it was exactly this punch that shattered the lightning in the man's hand. At the same time, the man was blasted flying. Meanwhile, a ray of light flashed through the air. The man's expression changed drastically, and he forcefully twisted his body. Even though he'd avoided this lethal strike, his right arm had been severed. The spirit beauty sword didn't stop there. It flew back and continued to slash at the man. Right at this moment, an old man suddenly appeared in midair, and the old man hurriedly said, "Please stop." "Well, this." The old man hadn't even finished speaking when the man's head instantly flew into the air. The old man's expression instantly became ferocious when he witnessed this scene, and he stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "You deserve to die." As soon as he finished speaking, he was about to attack. But right at this moment, a wine gourd suddenly descended from the sky, and countless drops of alcohol surged out from within it. The old man's expression changed drastically, and he suddenly pressed his hands forward. In an instant, the space before him started to warp. Warping matter. A Dharma realm expert. There was a moment of silence in the air, and then the drops of alcohol suddenly stopped moving. But in the next moment, they pierced through space and drowned the old man. Bang, 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 bang. The old man's body fell repeatedly in midair, and numerous explosions resounded incessantly. It didn't take long for the old man to fall into the swamp. But in the next moment he was about to fly up again. But right at this moment, a figure suddenly stepped on the old man's head. It was Old Man Ji. Old Man Ji stepped forcefully on the head of the old man who'd fallen into the swamp. The latter's expression was ferocious, and no matter how he resisted, he was unable to exert any strength. Old Man Ji fiercely gulped down a mouthful of alcohol, and then he said, "Old one, let me do it." Yi Xian turned around and left. Old Man Ji turned around and looked into the distance. As he looked, his eyes suddenly became slightly moist. "Master, this time I won't let my students be bullied again. Just like how you protected me all those years ago." Chapter 91. After Yi Xian left the swamp, he ran all the way. Old Man Ji said that Yi Ling was in a valley hundreds of miles away, and Mo Yunqi and Ji Anji had already rushed over. It wasn't that Old Man Ji didn't want to make a move, but every time he did, someone would stop him. This person was naturally Li Xuanzang. Outside the secret land, Li Xuanzang stood on a treetop and looked at the mystic realm in the distance expressionlessly. Beside him stood a black-robed man. The black-robed man suddenly said, "Chu State's young master Xuemei has already been killed, and that rushing thunder hand Li Tai, who almost entered the martial ranking, was also killed by this person. Why didn't you stop Old Man Ji when he made his move earlier?" Li Xuanzang said indifferently, Li Tai's clan is a famous and wealthy clan in the Yu Kingdom. Not only did they lose a super genius from their clan this time, but they also lost a myriad law realm expert. Do you think they will let the matter rest? The black-robed man was silent. Li Xuanzang looked at the mystic realm. That youth must have a powerful backer or faction behind him. If he doesn't die inside, then someone else will. And the people who come are all monstrous geniuses of this era. These people all have factions of various sizes backing them. The more people he kills, the more enemies he will have. When the time comes, I want to see who can protect him. The black-robed man nodded slightly. This person's natural talent is truly too monstrous. Perhaps only Lancio can suppress him amongst the younger generation. This person really can't be allowed to live. Li Xuanzang slowly closed his eyes. He's dead. On the other side, somewhere, the ninth-floor lord of the drunken immortal and suddenly said in a soft voice. He killed the cold plum prince from Chu State as well as the rushing thunder hand Li Tai from Li clan of Yu State. Beside ninth-floor master, Jiang Yuetian said in a deep voice, Li Xuanzang has ulterior motives. He wanted to make Yi Xian and Sanglan Academy hate each other. What a vicious heart. The ninth-floor master said calmly, pull with all your might. Karaki Academy is very outstanding. So outstanding that the old man wants to laugh. Jiang Yuetian, within the secret realm. An afterimage flashed across the mountains at an extremely fast speed like a gust of wind. This person was Mo Yunqi. After finding out where Yi Ling was, Mo Yunqi immediately moved. At this moment he raised his speed to the limit. He had to find Yi Ling as soon as possible so that Yi Ling would not fall into the hands of others and be used to threaten Yi Xian. Approximately 15 minutes later, Mo Yun stood up and arrived at a mountain valley. He swept his eyes over the surroundings and saw that the mountain valley was completely empty. There wasn't a single person in sight. Suddenly, Mo Yunqi's expression changed greatly. He flashed backwards, and just as he flashed away, the ground he was originally standing on suddenly collapsed. Mo Yunqi had just stopped when the ground beneath his feet suddenly started wriggling. His expression changed drastically when he witnessed this scene, and his figure soared into the sky. Meanwhile, a figure suddenly shot into the sky from the ground. In the air, Mo Yunqi's hand suddenly spread out, and a flying dagger flew down. Below, the man suddenly crossed his arms. Boom! The ink cloud soaring saber was blocked. But at this moment he had already retreated 100 feet. Mo Yunqi looked into the distance. In front of him was a thin and small man. The man's body was extremely thin and small. To be precise, he was actually a dwarf. The man looked coldly at Mo Yunqi. You're not that Yi Xian. Mo Yunqi glanced around. Where's that little girl? The man pointed to a mountain wall not far away. Mo Yunqi looked in the direction that the man was pointing. On the mountain wall in the distance, there was a tree that grew out of a crack in the mountain wall, and on the tree there was a little girl hanging. Was Yi Ling. Seeing that Yi Ling was hanging, Mo Yunqi's expression instantly turned cold. He turned to look at the dwarf in front of him and said fiercely, Motherf asterisk her, you shorty, are you even AF asterisk king man? As soon as he finished speaking, he charged towards the dwarf. The dwarf's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he suddenly stomped his right foot lightly. In an instant, his entire figure vanished into the ground. Mo Yunqi's attack missed, but he didn't continue pursuing the dwarf. Instead, he leaped towards Yi Ling, who was on the mountain wall. He was extremely swift like a spirit ape, and it didn't take long for him to arrive before the tree that Yi Ling was on. Right at this moment, a large saber suddenly slashed down from his right. Mo Yunqi flipped his right hand slightly. In an instant, a cold ray of light shot out like a bolt of lightning from his palm, and it struck the blade of the large saber. Bang! The large saber trembled violently, and the person who held the saber took a few steps back along with the saber. Mo Yunqi was just about to attack again. However, right at this moment, a shadow suddenly appeared in front of him. At the same time, 2 rays of cold light slashed towards his throat. Mo Yunqi's expression changed slightly. He tapped the ground lightly with the tip of his foot, and his figure floated over 10 m back. Meanwhile, the sound of air being torn apart resounded abruptly. Mo Yunqi's expression changed drastically, and he forcefully twisted his body as he retreated. An ink arrow pierced directly into his shoulder. Mo Yunqi turned around and saw a black-clothed man standing on a huge rock nearby. The black-clothed man held a longbow in his hand and carried a quiver of arrows on his back. He's not here to kill Yi Xian. Right at this moment, the scarred man who held a long saber gazed at Mo Yunqi. He's probably a student of Tsanglan Academy, and he's on the same side as Yi Xian. Mo Yunqi glanced at everyone present. To be honest, I won't say anything about how all of you treat Bandit Yi, but... When he spoke up to here, he suddenly pointed at Yi Ling, who was on the tree in the distance, and roared furiously, "She's just an ordinary little girl, yet all of you treat her like this. Are you even fucking men?" The scarred man spoke indifferently. If she wants to blame someone, then she can only blame her brother for being Yi Xian. As he spoke, he tightened his grip on the large saber in his hand. "Let's take him down first." As soon as he finished speaking, he leaped up and slashed fiercely towards Mo Yunqi. Mo Yunqi was just about to attack when an arrow suddenly shot towards him from behind. Mo Yunqi's expression was quite unsightly. He didn't dare attack, and he dodged to the side once more. As soon as he descended to the ground, a petite figure suddenly appeared in front of him, and then 2 rays of cold light slashed towards his head. Moreover, an ink arrow suddenly shot towards Mo Yunqi from behind. Mo Yunqi suddenly turned around, and he vanished on the spot in the next moment. An afterimage flashed through the battlefield. At this moment, Mo Yunqi's speed had undoubtedly risen to its peak. The longbow-wielding man's pupils constricted, and he was about to retreat when a golden flying knife suddenly appeared in front of him without any warning. The man with the longbow floated backwards, and then he grabbed the bow with both hands before swiftly smashing it forward. Bang! The bow exploded into pieces. However, he dodged this lethal flying knife. Mo Yunqi was just about to attack when a sharp aura suddenly slashed towards him from behind. It was the scarred man. This time he was unable to dodge because he just stopped, and the scarred man's timing was perfect. He just found this exact spot. Mo Yunqi held the golden flying knife in his hand as he turned around and slashed. Bang! Along with an explosive sound, Mo Yunqi was sent flying along with the flying dagger. As he flew, he directly fell from the sky. Meanwhile, the ground below him suddenly started wriggling. Mo Yunqi's expression instantly changed when he witnessed this scene. If he were to fall, then he would definitely die. Right at this moment, a flying sword suddenly flew over from afar. In the next moment, the flying sword descended firmly before Mo Yunqi and endured the force of his fall. Mo Yunqi heaved a sigh of relief. Meanwhile, the flying sword suddenly left and slashed down towards the ground below. The flying sword instantly slashed into the ground. After a moment of silence, a shrill cry resounded from the ground, and it didn't take long for a spot on the ground to turn red. A sword charged out from beneath the ground, and then it descended firmly before a man who wasn't too far away. It was Yi Xian. Mo Yunqi heaved another sigh of relief when he saw Yi Xian, and then he pointed at the scarred man and his younger sister. "I'll leave them to you. I'll go rescue Xiaoling. Watch out for the one on the left with the arrow." As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished on the spot. On the other hand, Yi Xian raised his head to look at the scarred man and his younger sister. In the next moment he suddenly vanished on the spot. His speed was extremely swift, and the exquisite sword before him was even swifter. It was the first to slash towards the scarred man. A wisp of a savage smile appeared on the corners of the scarred man's mouth. "Let me see exactly how strong you are." As soon as he finished speaking, he leaped down from the rock. At the same time, he held the saber with both hands and slashed down fiercely. This slash was extremely large, and it seemed as if it could split a mountain apart. Below, the Lingxiu sword suddenly stopped. At this moment, Yi Xian rushed to the front of the Lingxiu sword. He grabbed the Lingxiu sword and stomped the ground with his right foot. His entire person, along with the sword, soared into the sky. The howl of a sword tore through the surroundings. Subsequently, a sword directly collided with the blade of the large saber. A needle against an on. Bang! The sword and saber shook violently, and in the blink of an eye, the saber shattered with a bang while the saber-scarred man's entire body was instantly thrown flying. He flew for over 30 m before finally smashing heavily onto an enormous rock. Fresh blood sprayed from the scarred man's mouth. The scarred man wiped off the blood on the corner of his mouth, and then he gazed at the petite woman and roared furiously, "Run! Quickly!" At this moment, he knew that the swordsman young man before him wasn't someone the siblings could go against at all. In the distance, the petite woman didn't flee. She charged over to the scarred man and stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "Let us brother and sister live. We'll return to the clan." Right at this moment, a ray of light flashed. The petite woman's head instantly flew into the air. The scarred man was stunned, and then he charged madly at Yi Xian. "I'll fucking kill you." A ray of light pierced through the center of the scarred man's forehead. The scarred man's body fell to the ground. Yi Xian glanced at the two corpses on the ground. If I lose, you won't let us brother and sister off. Bang. Right at this moment, an explosion suddenly resounded from above Yi Xian, and then a figure smashed to the ground from midair. It was Mo Yunqi who smashed to the ground. Blood sprayed out from Mo Yunqi's mouth. P.S. After it went on sale yesterday, at least 80% of the readers left. Over 6,000 bookmarks, but only around 1,000 read the original version. Azure Phoenix thanks the readers who stayed. I really do. Please cherish it. I love all of you. I also hope that the readers who read pirated copies will subscribe to the original version and support me. I rely on this to make a living. Chapter 92. Yi Xian raised his head and saw a man floating in the air. The man was dressed in black with a long purple ribbon tied around his waist and a piece of sheep-fat white jade. The man's appearance was not particularly handsome, but he was angular and his gaze was deep and sharp, giving people a sense of oppression. The man in black floated in the air and looked down at Yi Xian. His gaze was indifferent without any fluctuation. Yi Xian retracted his gaze and looked at Mo Yunqi, who was not far away. How is it? Mo Yunqi got up and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. I was careless. Yi Xian nodded. Take a rest first. Mo Yunqi said in a deep voice, be careful. He's a real expert. Yi Xian nodded and looked up at the man in black in the air. You're here? The man in black didn't waste any words. His figure trembled and his entire body fell from the sky. His speed was extremely fast. This fall was like a huge mountain crushing down, giving off an extremely overbearing feeling of oppression. Expert. Yi Xian retracted his gaze. At this moment he had lost the opportunity to make a move. It should be said that his position had a natural disadvantage. Yi Xian didn't dodge. This was because when two people fought, especially when it was a fight between experts, it was a competition of momentum. Whoever was weaker would be the one being suppressed. And at this moment he didn't want to be suppressed. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Bang. A formless aura exploded with Yi Xian as the center. Sword aura. This sword aura blocked the aura above Yi Xian's head. However, the man in black didn't stop. On the contrary, his speed became even faster. When the man in black was about 5 feet above Yi Xian's head, he stomped his foot. Bang. A domineering force gushed out from his foot like a volcanic eruption. The powerful force caused the ground beneath Yi Xian's feet to explode. At this moment, the Lingxiu sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly moved. Buzz. Along with the sound of the sword, a ray of sword light soared into the sky. There was a moment of silence. Bang. An earth-shattering sound suddenly resounded. Then a wave of energy rippled in the air. At the same time, two figures retreated from the energy wave. Both of them retreated more than 10 feet. Mo Yunqi didn't stay idle either. While Yi Xian was fighting with the man in black, he suddenly charged towards Yi Ling. But when he arrived in front of Yi Ling, his expression suddenly changed. In the air, Mo Yunqi suddenly turned. With this turn, a cold light brushed past his ear. He stopped and scanned his surroundings. There was no one around. There was no one around. Mo Yunqi's expression immediately turned ugly. He did not dare to act rashly. Even if he were to save Yi Ling now, it would only make the situation worse because he wasn't confident that he could escape with Yi Ling. As if he had thought of something, Mo Yunqi suddenly said angrily, Bai Zai, you bastard, can't you hurry over? Don't tell me you're lost. Below, Yi Xian and the man in black stopped at the same time. The man in black glanced at Yi Xian and said, the information was wrong. You're not the great swordsman. Yi Xian grinned. Surprised? The man in black was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly vanished. I'm not here to chat with you. As soon as Yi Xian finished speaking, he had arrived in front of the man in black, and a cold light pierced the man's forehead. The man in black narrowed his eyes and tapped the ground lightly with the tip of his foot. In an instant, his entire body became illusory. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly slashed behind him with his sword. The man in black had appeared behind Yi Xian at some point in time. The black-clothed man's pupils shrank slightly. Obviously, he did not expect Yi Xian to react so quickly and actually be able to react. Without thinking too much, he tapped the ground lightly with the tip of his foot, and his entire body floated backward several feet. Before he could stop, a flying sword suddenly appeared in front of him. This flying sword was so fast that he couldn't dodge it. The man in black didn't choose to dodge. He suddenly lifted his right leg and swept it horizontally. This leg was mixed with a strong wind as if it could tear everything apart. Using his leg to fight against the sword, obviously the man in black was very confident in his leg. At this moment the sword arrived. Boom. As soon as the two touched, Lingxiu's sword shook violently and the sword gleam around it was shattered. However, at this moment, a hand suddenly grabbed the hilt of Lingxiu's sword. Yi Xian held Lingxiu's sword and stabbed forward. One sword to determine life and death. At this moment he revealed his trump card. When facing an enemy he would kill with a single strike when he was confident and not give his opponent any chance. But earlier he wasn't fully confident. So, he chose to execute life and death with a single strike now. This moment was the best opportunity to execute life and death with a single strike. At the moment that Yi Xian executed life and death with a single strike, the sword aura contained within Lingxiu's sword could instantly reach its limit. Sword aura. This strike carried a peerlessly overbearing aura. At the moment that Yi Xian executed life and death with a single strike, the expression of the man in black changed drastically. He didn't flee because if he fled now he would definitely die. The man's expression turned savage, and he stomped his right leg on the ground. Shatter. Bang. The ground in an area of 30 m cracked, and subsequently, the man's figure suddenly became illusory. In an instant, countless leg shadows instantly drowned Yi Xian. Every single leg shadow carried a powerful force, and the force was so strong that it caused numerous explosions to resound in the surroundings. It was the sound of air being torn apart. Mo Yunqi's expression instantly changed when he witnessed this scene. This was at least a mid-grade earth-rank martial technique, and the black-clothed man's cultivation was at least at the Nether Passage realm. A true monstrous genius. A trace of worry appeared in Mo Yunqi's eyes. Below. Bang. An explosion resounded abruptly, and then a figure was blasted flying. Mo Yunqi instantly heaved a sigh of relief when he saw this figure. Because this figure wasn't Yi Xian, and it was the black-clothed man. The black-clothed man retreated repeatedly, and he retreated for an entire 30 m. Moreover, a strand of blood essence would spray from his mouth with every single step he took back. Moreover, the ground beneath his feet was ceaselessly cracking apart as he retreated. Force was mutual. Earlier, his force had collided head-on with Yi Xian's sword strike in the most violent manner possible, so he naturally suffered a backlash from his own strength at the moment he lost. In next to no time the black-clothed man stopped moving. At the instant he stopped, the black clothes on his upper body exploded into pieces, and beneath the black clothes was pure silver armor. Moreover, there was a deep crack on the silver armor, and the skin beneath it was already visible. Light rank armor. It was exactly this armor that had blocked Yi Xian's attack just now. Otherwise he would be dead by now. The black-clothed man stared fixedly at Yi Xian, and he was just about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. The black-clothed man's pupils constricted slightly, and then he suddenly stomped his right leg towards the ground. Bang. In an instant countless bits of rock and dust shot into the sky and blasted towards Yi Xian. However, all of this wasn't able to stop Yi Xian's sword, and the spirit gray sword slashed out from amidst the bits of rock and dust. The black-robed man's expression changed drastically. He took a step back and kicked at the spirit elegant sword. His angle was very tricky. He didn't kick the tip of the spirit elegant sword, but the body of the sword instead. Bang. The spirit gray sword was kicked to the side, but right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of him. Yi Xian directly blasted his fist towards the black-clothed man. "I'll blast your head apart with a single punch." This punch didn't just contain fist force, it also contained boundless battle intent. The black-clothed man's pupils constricted when he sensed the strength within Yi Xian's fist. Dual cultivation of the sword and martial arts. An instant later. Bang. The black-clothed man's entire body was blasted flying. Yi Xian was just about to attack when an unexpected event occurred. A cold light suddenly appeared behind Yi Xian without any warning. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly as he turned around and punched. Bang. The cold light shattered. However, there wasn't a single person behind him. Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings and he didn't sense anything. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian suddenly turned around to look at Mo Yunqi. "Cover me." As soon as he finished speaking, he leaped a few times and sprinted towards Yi Ling's position. In the distance, Mo Yunqi looked behind Yi Xian instead, and there was a golden flying knife between his fingers. Right at this moment, another cold light silently appeared behind Yi Xian. Yi Xian didn't turn around because a golden flying knife had already appeared behind him. Bang. The cold light was directly shattered by the golden flying knife. But right at this moment an unexpected event occurred. A black arrow suddenly shot over from Yi Xian's right. Yi Xian turned around, and the spirit gray sword in his hand suddenly slashed out. Bang! The black arrow was instantly shattered by Yi Xian's sword, but right at this moment, another arrow appeared in front of him, and behind this arrow there were 2 more arrows. The 3 arrows were connected from head to tail. 3 consecutive arrows. Yi Xian opened his palm, and the spirit gray sword appeared in his palm. The next moment Yi Xian slashed forward with the sword in his hand. On the body of the sword light was dazzling. The sword fell, and the arrow in front of him was directly shattered. However, after this arrow, another arrow directly hit the tip of the spirit gray sword. Buzz! The spirit gray sword shook violently, but that arrow shattered with a loud bang. One had to know that the spirit gray sword was at the light grade. But right at this moment, the last arrow suddenly changed its trajectory and stabbed straight at Yi Xian's chest. Yi Xian punched out. Bang! The arrow directly shattered. Right at this moment, a cold light silently appeared behind Yi Xian once more. Yi Xian didn't turn around and a shadow flashed by. Mo Yunqi appeared behind Yi Xian, and then a flying dagger slashed down. Bang! The cold light was directly slashed into pieces. Mo Yunqi looked around vigilantly because up until now, he still hadn't discovered exactly who attacked. After Yi Xian shattered the 3 arrows, he glanced coldly at a huge rock on his left. There was a man with a longbow on his back. The man with the longbow stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Dual cultivation of sword and martial arts. Yi Xian paid no attention to the man with the longbow. His figure shook, and he arrived in front of Yi Ling. Yi Ling had already fainted, and her face was abnormally pale. Her hands were tied by the rope, and there were even blood-red marks on them. Yi Xian was expressionless. The spirit gray sword in his hand suddenly flew out and slashed the rope that tied Yi Ling up. Right at the moment Yi Xian stretched out his hand to hug Yi Ling, something unexpected occurred. A shadow silently appeared behind Yi Ling, and in the next moment, a figure appeared in front of Yi Xian. Subsequently, a black sword stabbed directly into Yi Xian's dantian. At the same time, a voice resounded by Yi Xian's ear. "I've been waiting for you for a long time. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.